What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Hearthstone qualifiers for the Asian Games 2018. My name is Gia, and I'll be one of your casters for today. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the tournament, this is the qualifier stage for the Asian Games, the 18th Asian Games, and it's divided into 5 different groups based on the nations of the Asian region. So the slots are distributed as such: 2 for East Asia, 1 for South Asia, 2 for Southeast Asia, 1 for Central Asia, and 1 for West Asia. The host country, I believe, will be Jakarta, Indonesia for the preliminaries, and then the 2022 official games will be held in China. So discussing the format of the tournament, it's your standard best of 5 conquest with 1 ban, and within the groups there will be round robins between each player, and each player has to submit, of course, 4 decks with unique classes. You gain points for winning each round in the best of 5 and 0 for losing them. And then if there is to be a tie between 2 players, the priority order between the breakers is first their head-to-head result, so within the games, and then the point differential. So for the group stages, we have these players who, of course, had to go through their own qualifiers within their own countries. And so far, heading the East Asian group is Kin 0531 from Hong Kong, and Kakaka at the rear there from Macau. And other names you should be aware of are Treads Red Surrender, Jason Zhou, and AHQ Roger. For Southeast Asia, the groups haven't begun yet, but Gilgamesh from Malaysia and Dizdai from Thailand have had some pretty good results throughout the year. Kai's from Singapore, also one of the up-and-coming players from that region. First game on stream is going to be a best of 5, of course, between Surrender and Treads Red, and they have a full mirror in terms of the classes, and it seems like the archetype breakdown is very similar as well. Both druids are token druids, both paladins are odd paladins, both shamans are even shamans, but the warlocks are a little bit different. Surrenders is a cube lock and Treads Red is an even lock. Not that that is going to matter very much, because they have mutually banned these classes out, which makes a lot of sense because the rest of their decks are very much board based, and the cube block has a lot of removal in the form of Defile and Hellfire and Doomsayer and so on. So I think we're gonna be in for a lot of mirrors, and I gotta say, Surrender is very well known for having near perfect technical play. So if it comes down to just smoothness of board trades and overall game plan, I feel like he might be a bit more favored. But of course, Treads Red has been pretty consistent throughout the year and showing good results, making it to playoffs and so on. So the first game is going to be the Even Shaman from Surrender versus the Token Druid from Treads Red, who has already picked up a Wild Growth, and that is pretty good. Surrender, of course, has the Mercspark Eel, which is one of the key early cards to ascertain board pressure and board dominance, so I assume that he'll be keeping that, and probably none of these other ones, although Earthen Might is a consideration. The Shaman very much has to rely on taking the board early on so that they have the minions to trade into the many tokens from the Druid that can come out of nowhere. Of course, Even Shaman doesn't include board clears like Lightning Storm, because 1, that's not in the game plan of the deck, and 2, it's not even cost. If only Maelstrom Portal were still available.
We have turned our curse into our strength.
Alright, so just gonna be the hero power, I assume, from Surrender here. He could think about coining out the Mercspark Eel if he wants to curve 2 into 2. But probably no rush here. Healing Totem is actually very significant later on in the game if Surrender were to start making a lot of trades into Wisps, because that means his minions essentially don't take any damage at the end of the turn. So I wouldn't mind just playing out the Mercspark Eel here, even though the damage is not used for value. It's just his highest health play, but I guess Surrender disagrees. This is a little bit more vulnerable to Spellstone, but it's not a big deal. Treasure gonna go for the branching pass to get some more options. You don't want to be playing out the Whispering Woods when you're behind on board and when you don't have the mana to pair the Soul of the Forest with it. Crucially drawing into Nourish for ramps, so this could get spicy real quick. I assume Surrender wants to be dropping the Corpse Taker here and then buff it up with Flame Tongue next turn and try and get as much damage to the face as possible before Treadsred can go wide on the board. And attacking with his 2 minions first means that Surrender's hesitating a little bit about the positioning. Because next turn, if he wants to buff up the Corpse Taker with Flame Tongue, it's gonna go on the rightmost side and not buff up another minion. But I don't mind this because it means that you're better positioned if Treadsred does clear the Corpse Taker. It's just gonna be a Nourish turn here, and probably the Spellstone to clear off the Direwolf Alpha. Spreading Plague, a pretty brutal card in this matchup because the Shaman does like to go wide on board. So Treadsred thinking about whether he could set up a swipe next turn perhaps, but I feel like it's too much damage to take if he doesn't use the Spellstone this turn. He is gonna go for the setup though, a very ballsy play, and that means he's gonna be taking a hell of a lot of damage this turn. So Surrender doesn't have the lethal quite yet, but he can push 12 with the Corpse Taker alone and another 3 from the other 2 minions. But that means he is leaving himself a little weak to Spreading Plague, and that's exactly why he is hesitating here. I wonder if there's any consideration for healing your own healing totem after it attacks, of course. It does mean you lose 2 damage to the face, but it's kind of like you're gaining 5 or preventing 5 heal from your opponent. I do think the Flame Tongue has to come down though. Or perhaps not. Alright, so this way, if Spreading Plague comes down, the Flame Tongue Totem on between the Corpse Taker and the Phoenix means that 3 of them will immediately be cleared. Pickup of the Arcane Tyrant is very powerful for Treadsred here though. So now the Flame Tongue's coming down for sure. And I guess you can heal... Is it the face, actually? I'm unsure. The Healing Totem pickup's actually pretty significant. Or rather, the fact that the Healing Totem stuck, because now that means that just the Beetle can't get rid of it next turn. Surrender just thinking about whether or not he should play around the second Spreading Plague, but I think it's not really that big of a consideration. It's not that likely. So I wouldn't mind just playing down the eel here. The merit for targeting the Beetle is very situational. You'd have to have a really good read on what cards are in Treadsred's hand to make that decision, so I wouldn't mind just going for the face. Alright, so Treadsred definitely gonna have to spend a turn clearing here with the swipe onto the 5-3, a beetle trade into the corpse taker, and the tyrant going into the flame tongue totem. I think that would just leave the eel up. I don't think it's worth expending a Savage Roar on because he has the Whispering Woods and Soul of the Forest in hand already. He might be able to think of this as a turn to sneak in the Whispering Woods. It's not Hagatha. The mana is not available for Hagatha yet. And he'd only really be scared of some kind of Knife Juggler shenanigans in that case. So targeting the Corpse Taker instead. Oh, so he plans to leave the beetle up this way. Alright, I can see this. Yikes, pretty awkward for Surrender here, and I like the play from Treadsred because having one taunt remaining on board makes it so that Surrender has a difficult time pushing through with more minions. And I think the play might be to go for... Alright, I was gonna say Flame Tongue, and then Hex the Arcane Tyrant once you get past that. But Surrender values having the totem over the Flame Tongue here. I guess so he has more of an option for burst. But it seems like Treadsred has turned the corner here. He's very solidly ahead on board now. And I think Surrender may just have to rely on Hagatha from this point on, but she is not available to play just yet. And with double Power of the Wild, double Savage Roar, I think this might just be lethal. That's crazy. Okay, no Taunt Totem available. So Treadsred has 9 on board, double the power of the Wild makes it 15. Each Savage Roar is another 8 damage, so I think that just does it. And yeah, that is game 1 going to Treadsred there. A lot of turns where both players hesitated and went through every play, and that is something you gotta appreciate from these top level guys. Surrender, not much he could do there to play around Spreading Plague, which is one of the most punishing cards in the matchup, but he navigated it as best as he could, and congratulations to Treadsred as well for making the best out of what wasn't the best hand in the mid game. So for Treadsred, that leaves his own Even Shaman and Odd Paladin still in the running, whereas Surrender has his entire lineup here. Regarding queue order, I'm not quite sure what should be done because there's so many potential for there's so much potential for mirror matches here. But I assume the Odd Paladin should be pretty decently placed against Even Shaman if it gets the axe. Oh, sorry, the Maul, the Unidentified Maul. Could be one of the best ways to swing the board. Again, all of these decks are very much reliant on being able to seize the board early and then stick minions. The one who is able to go widest on board first can essentially go unchallenged because they can dictate the trades. And now it's going to be an Odd Paladin mirror, and Treadsred already with the Quarter Creeper and Firefly, although he is going second, which can be a bit of a disadvantage in this mirror. I expect that he tosses the Veteran and the Blessing of Might, try to get lost in the jungle. Double Quarter Creeper in hand is insane in the mirror. So yeah, just looking at these hands, I feel like Treadsred will have a leg up, but maybe Surrender pulls the perfect draws turn after turn, and we shall see. So the odd paladin mirror, everybody's familiar with this. It's just a bunch of little guys bumping into each other, and you generally want to have the most little guys first. Keep them all healthy, take all the value trades you can, and generally you just never lose the board from there because Knife Juggler is not a factor. So the argument for Argent Squire versus Flame Elemental is not all that significant unless you have the Divine Shield Maul in hand, I'd say.
Reporting for duty.
So Treadsred there taking the value bump just because his board trades entirely with the other board. Whereas if he had not taken the value bump, then his 1/1s wouldn't be able to challenge the Flame Elemental, so that makes a lot of sense there. Little does Surrender know that the more he extends, the cheaper the creepers, and even though he has the board at this moment, the corridor creepers coming down next turn for free will be absolutely insane. That kind of health total in this matchup is just absolutely insane. I mean, even if the creepers were to just have one attack, the fact that they can take up to 5 trades with their health total makes them pretty much game winning. So a turn for double creeper and hero power seems decent, even though it's not all that mana efficient. Even going for the maul here is fine, I guess. You can't be all that greedy, and it does mean he can get rid of one more minion. So yeah, I like this, and just like that, Surrender seems locked out of the game already. If he had one more mana to play this Fungal Mancer, he might still have a shot, but it's just not the way the cards panned out for him. How can he get back in the game? If he goes for hero power and veteran and sticks 2 minions next turn somehow, then Fungal Mancer will be able to buff them up. But he can't take any good trades this turn because of the health on the corridor creepers, even if they didn't have Divine Shield. So I guess the best option for Surrender there is indeed just to go face. And Treadsred can have a field day.
Speak your peace.
Just gonna be doing some simple trades here. Playing around level up by clearing one of the or 2 of the Silver Hand recruits as opposed to the 2/1 minions, I guess. Honestly, level up is the only thing Treadsred has to be scared of at this point. And even on this board, it won't be too punishing because both of the corridor creepers can take trades with buffed up recruits and still survive. So Surrender has pretty much just the Fungal Mancer option, and then he can take some value trades. But again, the corridor creepers are way too much. So he can buff up 1 recruit and the Acris veteran, I guess. And actually, I'd like to see Surrender just go face with those, because if he trades with the 2 smaller recruits, I don't think he gets past the corridor creepers anyway. And so he has to hope that Treadsred doesn't, or just keeps trading minions, and then maybe Surrender pulls out a win with some Vine Cleavers going face, or even the Blessed Maul going face. It's really rough. Yeah, and of course just take the trade with the 2/1 with one of those. Okay, Surrender is still choosing to play for board here, but it's really not gonna work out for him. Not to say that the other play would have worked out either.
Reporting for duty.
But there really is no way out from this point. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the concede here, but we all know Surrender as a guy who doesn't give up unless it is absolutely over. funny thing about this matchup is if you take attacks to the face one turn too soon, you think, oh, I'm so ahead on board, I can just do this. Suddenly the rug can be pulled out from under you. So you can't blame the players for taking every single trade here, taking every precaution and making sure there is 0% chance your opponent can swing things back in your favor. Funnily enough, it would have been better for Surrender to just go face there so that the raid leader wouldn't have had space to come down on board, but not that it would have made any big difference. There was 7 damage on board. Raid leader would have added another 6 and Blessing of Might. Yeah, still not lethal, but the writing has been on the wall for several turns now. And by several turns, I mean since the turn that the double creepers came down much cheaper.
Reporting for duty.
So very soon, Treads Red is going to be up to a 2-0 lead, which is gotta be a really good feeling, only having the even shaman left, which should kind of struggle, I guess, against the token druid again with the spreading plague. And it can kind of go either way against Odd Paladin, depending on who goes first and whether the even shaman gets some good knife juggler rolls. But he's still in a very good position to sweep, if possible.
Reporting for duty.
So Surrender with a very mighty looking board, but it is quite a few turns too late. Treads Red had set up the 2 or 3 turn lethal long ago, and yeah, just gonna be the shaman left for him. Treads had a pretty good year throughout HCT this year. He was at the playoffs for the first season for Asia Pacific. He had a pretty good showing at HCT Taipei, and he was also 9th to 12th in HCT Bangkok. So he's had a pretty good run of it in Asia Pacific tour stops in general. And of course, in previous years, he also had showings at the Asia Pacific Spring Championship, and so on, and the also had a pretty good showing against Ant at the Hearthstone Spring Championship in 2017. As for Surrender, do we really need to talk more about his accolades? This guy has been on fire lately. Right, so Surrender queuing up the druid here, and the spreading plague is in hand already. I wonder how much he values keeping that card without ramp in hand. It is an interesting consideration, and he does choose to keep it, but that does mean he'll have not that much to do in the early turns. So Treads Red with a variety of 2-drops, as you expect to see from even shaman. With the way the damage lines up, though, I don't think he gets there on time to beat the spreading plague. Starting with the knife juggler makes a lot of sense because you're kind of maximizing the damage you get from the minion drops. And Surrender feeling desperate enough that he has to hero power this. And if Treads Red is to roll a taunt or healing totem next turn, and there's a very good chance of that, Surrender is going to be in a whole world of pain. And he actually misses the roll, though. That is really unfortunate for Treads Red. I feel like Flametongue Totem can come down pretty safely here, unless you're... Although coin swipe is always scary. You do want to be pushing the damage as early on as possible to kind of beat the spreading plague before it happens. None of his 2-drops are particularly good against swipe though, so maybe the play was Earthen Might. So coin Oaken Summons seems pretty straightforward here for surrender. Actually, choosing to hold on to it, I guess this means that he wants to coin Spreading Plague on 5, which I can see that happening. Makes sense. Corpseaker off the top, really good for Treadsred here. Especially with Flame Tongue in hand. Corpseaker is a minion that is not only very difficult to clear, it's semi-immune to swipe. It just represents so much damage with that Wind Fury. Especially when paired with Flame Tongue, you can sometimes get lethals out of nowhere. Surrender gonna have a bit of a breather, but Treadsred can clear this pretty easily with Flame Tongue Totem onto the Corpse Taker. Oh, I see. Going for the double trades here plays better around Spreading Plague as well, which I quite like. It's a pretty tricky turn. He can go for Direwolf. But if the idea is to play around Spreading Plague, I feel like Earthen might be the better option. And maybe skipping the totem?
I wonder.
It's always this game of chicken when you're playing Shaman against the Druid. You kind of think, okay, if this card is here, then this is my best play.
There is little time.
And if the card isn't there, though, you're sometimes sacrificing so much percent. So Treadsred does go for the double trades, but he also goes for a hero power. So it's not completely playing around Spreading Plague, but it is a hedge. And the most important thing is he got that buff onto the Corpse Taker and hit for 14 to face. So Surrender is still going to be in a bit of a pickle. Getting down Plague plus Tyrant is really, really powerful though. Yeah, unfortunately, because the Tyrant was able to come down, this Corpse Taker won't be surviving very long. Although Treadsred, fortunately for him, he picked up Fire Elemental, which gives him a really decent-sized minion on board, and also a way to clear off one of the beetles. He instead chooses to go for Hero Power and Wolf, though. I guess taking the opportunity to go wide on board because he had just seen the Spreading Plague, it's not reasonable to really expect the second one. With the role of the Healing Totem, that's actually pretty significant because Surrender can't just bump in the Arcane Tyrant, he'd have to sacrifice the Beetle as well. And that's pretty inconvenient, although since he has the second Plague, I don't mind that play at all. Okay, going for Savage Roar though. That means he can clear off the Taunt Totem with his face. The Tyrant goes into the Corpse Taker, and the Beetle goes into the Flame Tongue. Still leaves a decent chunk of damage on board, but you can't really expect the Shaman to have that much burst. I think Surrender would have only been scared of second Flame Tongue at that point. Debating on whether or not he should take the extra damage, 1 damage to face, to have more health onto the Beetle, and I think that makes sense that he would protect the health on the Beetle more because this damage cutoff means that 2 minions have to trade into it instead of 1. But yeah, yeah, Surrender has found himself in a pretty difficult spot. With the way his hand turned out though, and the lack of ramp, it was pretty difficult to get out of that. I wonder though if having plagued the turn earlier would have made things turn out a bit better. But Treadsred has the Calamos for lethal, and that is gonna be a really quick 3-0 to Treadsred. I gotta say, I did not see that coming. Surrender is one of the most decorated Hearthstone players, not only in Asia Pacific, but in the whole world. That is not to underestimate Treadsred though, because he's been a powerhouse of Japan and has had a lot of good results throughout the year, and both these players still have a lot to go through because this is a round robin within each region, so it's not the last you've seen of either of them. Welcome back everybody, you are watching the regional qualifiers for the Hearthstone tournament of the 18th Asian Games. My name is Gia and you are about to see a match between Kin0531 of Hong Kong versus Jason Zhou of China. We are in the thick of it in the group stage qualifiers of East Asia, and the format of the tournament is of course your standard best of 5 standard. It's also a round robin within each team, or rather each group, and so that means there's a lot of matches to come throughout the day, and East Asia is probably the most prominent region featured in the tournament. We also have quite a few players from Southeast Asia and some more players from Central Asia, West Asia, and South Asia, which might not be as well known to the general public, and I think that's really exciting to see that we have a bunch of players from countries that might not necessarily be that well represented in the main HTT circuit. So for this match, Jason Zhou, you all know him, he's a very, very famous player from China, frequently makes appearances at top level Hearthstone events, and has had a lot of good results throughout the past years, whereas Kin from Hong Kong has been having a stellar year. Aside from qualifying for playoffs, has made good showings at several tour stops, and I think he's had some really clean play and is currently leading his group. So it's going to be a good win for you guys, and Kin is leading off with his Q block versus the Token Druid from Jason Zhou. Jason Zhou having the Wild Growth into 4-drop curve, which you'd really like to see. If he picks up a Nourish, things could be going pretty well. But Kin has the Lackey Pact as well. Of course, now delayed by nerfs, but if he draws into a Mountain Giant pretty soon, things could get spicy. Jason Zhou comfortable with just dropping the Violet Teacher here because the answers are pretty limited for the Warlock for single target removal, but unfortunately the Spellstone is in hand for Kin here, so that means Jason Zhou's not going to have all that much to do aside from ramp, but once he hits that UI, it could be a bit worrisome for Kin here, although Q Block is generally pretty well positioned to deal with the Token Druid because they have Defile and such here. Jason Zhou taking a very aggressive stance here, realizing that the more time he gives the Q block, the more likely they have been to draw into Defile or Hellfire. Unfortunately, it is in hand for Kin here. I don't think Jason Zhou could have said that was unexpected because there's so many different clears. So just going to spend some time drawing because the Doomsayer locks out any minion development, not that it was in hand for Jason Zhou anyway. You can hear pretty free to just drop down the Spirit Slinger Umbra, which is really powerful. Only cleared by swipe against an empty board. I guess that was a bit of a greedy play. Just Lackey is fine as well. Spreading Plague 4-1. Not many worse feelings than that, but yeah, Jason Zhou doesn't have all that many options. Against Q Block, The only time you get very much spreading plague value is post Gul'dan, and if your opponent has Gul'dan and you don't have a board, then you're losing anyway. So yeah, Qin very solidly ahead here. He is free to tap. I mean, there's so many different things he could do with his 5-drops, right? He could cube the Lackey, he could faceless the Lackey, but picking up the Mountain Giant seems to make it the clear winner. No silence in the deck for Jason Joe, of course. That's not something you see in Token Druids, so Qin is very much fine with just leaving his Lackey on board there. So Jason Joe has picked up the second Whispering Wood, and because he has Soul of the Forest, that is a very important combo. It is weak to Defile, of course, but one has been seen already. Jason Joe just gonna take the risk here. He doesn't have Savage Roar or Power of the Wild in hand, or even Branching Paths, but Qin doesn't know that, so Qin should be feeling pretty scared here without having any board clear in hand at the moment. His Lackey is 1 and 3 to pick up a Void Lord though. Going for the Faceless here means that he will have 2 chances to get Void Lord here with the Dark Pact. Misses it, but if he gets Doomguard, then he can at least clear off 1 minion and his Death Rattle. And Qin should be very pleased to know that the Savage Roars or any minion buffs are not in hand for Jason Joe. He has a chance to draw into one with Wrath, but I don't think you're doing that when you have a pretty good ultimate Infestation. Because even if he were to draw into Savage Roar with the Wrath for 1, it still wouldn't be lethal, I believe. Okay, let's do some math. So he has 5 on board, Savage Roar would give him another 12. And the swipe is another 4, so not quite enough. So I think it might be UI here. Just go face with the rest of the Wisps. Hope that Qin still does not draw into any board clear. And perhaps go for the combo next turn. This is already a very scary looking board again for Qin, and the Savage Roar has been drawn for Jason Joe, but because the Void Lord came down safely, I don't think it's lethal quite yet. So Jason Joe, with the Savage Roar, he'd have to bump in, I believe, 2 of the Treants into the Void Lord, and then the Wisps would have to eat the Void Walkers. It's very inconvenient, but I don't think Jason Joe can expect to have many more minions after this turn, so that's why he's cashing in the Savage Roar now. Yeah, doing the trades this way is much better, so the Treants actually still survive on board. Jason Joe can take 2 from the Mountain Giant, take 8 from the Mountain Giant. That way he would still preserve the swipe in hand. But yeah, it doesn't make sense when you still have the Spellstone anyway. And Qin, very funnily enough, is still in a bad spot because Soul of the Forest to consolidate the board state, and still no board clears in hand is making this very awkward, but you can keep stalling at least with Stonehill Defenders. And the Savage Roar has just been played, so... Oh, Hellfire. Not actually gonna make a big difference because these Treants have Treants behind them. Picking up the Wax Elemental is pretty good here because it's just another cheap taunt guaranteed to eat up at least 2 attacks. Power of the Wild for buff plus double swipe onto each Stonehill defender. Still quite, not quite enough to get there. So if Kin can pick up the second Hellfire, no, he'd be dead if he plays double Hellfire to Ultimate Infestation, so... Looks like it just has to be the other Void Lord, yeah. That's actually the best thing he could have drawn there, I believe, because Defile wouldn't have helped much either. And so now Jason Zhou can go for another UI. Not sure if it goes face. Yeah, this makes sense. He only has to be scared of Gul'dan off the top now. So Jason Zhou was thinking about trading in the higher health treants, I think, to have some kind of play around Defile, but this makes more sense. It's a better way of playing around Defile. And again, he's thinking about Defile as to whether or not to play this Arcane Tyrant. Because if Jason Zhou plays it, then he is weak to Hellfire Defile. If he does not play it, then Hellfire Defile is significantly worse. So that's why he held it in hand. Kin is really hoping for this Defile here. That is not quite it, though. So the play, I believe, has to be... Okay, Dark Pact for heal. I wonder if Hellfire Tar Creeper gets him out of the woods here. He did see double swipe and double UI, so he only has to be scared of minion damage at this point. Oh, sorry. Just the Dark Pact and double Hellfire clears everything. Makes a lot of sense. And strangely enough, Kin could have felt like he had turned the corner there if it weren't just for the Savage Roar. So that is going to be the game. Yeah, going for the other play with Hellfire and Tar Creeper, also Tar Lord also would have been weak to Savage Roar because not all the minions were cleared there, so there wasn't very much Kin could do at that spot. Jason Zhou very well played, building up boards and boards and boards after boards of just tokens with whether or not there was Death Rattle on them. He had arranged the minion health in such a way that Defile wasn't too big of a punish, and pulled out the win there, so good on him. And for Jason Zhou, there remains the Odd Paladin and the Even Shaman, whereas for Kin, aside from his Q block, he still has to win with a Taunt Druid and the Quest Warrior, as his Control Priest has been banned away. For Jason Zhou, the Odd Rogue was banned away, not surprisingly, because the lineup from Kin is very much weak to those kinds of minions like Vicious Fledgling and Henchclan Thug. Alright, we're heading into game 2, and the Odd Paladin has been queued up by Jason Zhou, whereas Kin is giving it another go with his Q block. Mountain Giant, not exactly what you want to see in this matchup, but the Hellfire is at least some form of board clear. However, the Odd Paladin generally has kind of a good time in this matchup because even though the Warlock runs at least 4 forms of board clear and Doomsayer, the refill is just so powerful as long as the Paladin keeps pressing the hero power button. The inclusion of Divine Favor, of course, is also really powerful in the matchup, even though it's only a one of. Oftentimes the Paladin needs to stick only 1 or 2 boards and then buff it up with Level Up or Fungal Mancer, and they can sneak the win out that way. Or even better, Sunkeeper Tarim. That is not supposed to be in the deck, that is an even card, but sometimes the odd paladin just gets to have its cake and eat it. So Kin patiently waiting for the turn 5 before he pulls the trigger on the Hellfire. Makes a lot of sense. You don't want to expend one of your precious few board clears that early when the paladin can so easily refill. So Jason Joe, yeah, Stonehill Defender makes a lot of sense if you're expecting the Hellfire. You don't want to go too wide.
Speak your peace.
And they both survive the Hellfire as well. Yeah, this matchup is looking very, very one-sided here. Kin's still not gonna pull the trigger. I guess he thinks that if he plays Hellfire this turn, it's very easy for Jason Joe to refill, and then he dies to that board. But yeah, not playing it there is just too weak to level up, I suppose.
Reporting for duty.
But yeah, there really just is not much for Kin to do. He hasn't drawn into Defile, so Jason Joe getting the worst taunt roll, I believe. But it's not gonna matter all that much because as long as one minion sticks, one or two minions stick, Sunkeeper Tarim can clean this up pretty nicely. And for Kin, yeah, just no Defile. He's gonna go for the draw with the Kobold Librarian. Or is he? Maybe if he picks up cheap taunt from Stonehill, that could help him live, but no such luck. He at least gets the fully upgraded Spellstone for heal, but Sunkeeper Tarim is a really good card. Level up here is pretty decent as well if you play Lost in the Jungle. But this board is less weak to second Hellfire, so I don't mind this at all. And that isn't in hand anyway for Kin. He can stall a bit more with the Faceless Manipulator onto Tarim.
Out of my jungle.
And yeah, that is just gonna be the game, I believe, with the level up. Or yeah, just Iron Beak Owl. I mean, man, that was kind of painful to watch, to be honest. That was really one-sided with the draw Kin had. There is nothing he could do, but that is just the risk you run by playing Q-Block these days. Q-Block, while still a powerful deck, the nerfs hit it really hard against more board-based decks because you cannot Lackey Pact as soon, and the healing for you is a lot more limited there. So Jason Zoe already up 2-0, and he only has to sneak in a win with this Even Shaman now. And if the board clears don't come together like they didn't last game for Kin, then looks like it's smooth sailing for Jason Joe. However, you should know that Kin has been performing, I think, the best out of anyone in his whole group so far. So the lineup is actually a pretty good meta call. He has Quest Warrior, Taunt Druid, and Control Priest. Aside from this Q-Block that hasn't been performing all that well. Mind Blast Priest has been the subject of a lot of controversy on Hearthstone competitive Twitter recently. A lot of players have very, very strong opinions on this deck. They say it's terrible or they say it's great. Can't argue with results though, and Kin has been putting in some pretty good amounts of W's in this tournament so far, so there is something to be said for Mind Blast Priest, at least in this tournament. So Jason Joe gonna go ahead and bring out the Even Paladin, and there is everything that Kin was looking for last game. The Hellfires, the Defile, and the Doomsayer, and he must be pretty upset that it didn't come together last time, but that does give him a good shot at dealing with the early pressure from the Even Shaman. And even the Lord Godfrey. This is basically all of the AoE, except for the second Defile, in hand for Kin already. So pretty basic start for the Even Shaman. Just drop your 2-drop of choice into your buff card, except that it runs into a Doomsayer in this case. So If Jason Joe is feeling lucky, he can take the Flame Tongue Totem and the Hero Power roll, and if only one juggle hits the Doomsayer, he'll be fine. At least one. That was the correct order to start, and now he can decide if he wants to gamble it again, and he gets it, thankfully for Jason Joe. I've seen too many games lost to a 1 in 4 bad juggle. Unfortunately for Jason Joe, the Hellfire is in hand for Kin, but Jason Joe just had to take that risk. It's just like the old times of, what was it, Mid-Range Shaman versus Handlock. It's kind of not Handlock, my bad, Reno Lock. You would have to take that risk anyway, even going into turn 4. Just because if you wait longer, the Warlock is pretty much guaranteed to clear your board there. The follow-up is still pretty decent for Jason Joe. By using Flame Tongue to clear off the Stonehill Defender. Unfortunately, there's no good way to play around Defile, even if you use Mercspark Eel. If he Earthen Mites the Direwolf Alpha. No, that still doesn't work. Everything's bad to Defile because he rolled the 1/1 totem, which is pretty unfortunate. Oh, my bad. This is the way to play around Defile. Yeah, this is really clean from Jason Joe. He spotted it. That's why he's a pro player. Also plays around Hellfire somewhat, but for Kin, if Jason Joe... Alright, I was looking at how the Defile board would have turned out if Jason Joe played the Argent Commander there, but because he top decked Corpse Taker, this is a lot better. Not the best options here, but going for double taunts is never too bad. So I believe Jason Joe will want to get this Sea Giant down this turn because it's unlikely to come down on any other turn. Because some trades are going to be happening whether he likes it or not. I assume it's going to be, yeah, Corpse Taker into the Tar Creeper with the Divine Shield, then you trade in your Wrath of Air Totem, and then you can clear off the Stonehill Defender with the second attack and the Mercspark Eel. And despite the double Hellfire in hand for Kin, Jason Joe has set up a board which is pretty much Defile proof and also survives Godfrey, at least the Sea Giant does. Not many things on this world survive a Godfrey. Yeah, unfortunately, that is gonna be one damage short of lethal for Jason Joe, because Alakir puts in another 6. But it looks like it's not really gonna matter, because between having an Argent Commander for Burst, Charge Form Burst, and then the Fire Elemental on top of that, just one unupgraded Spellstone is not gonna get there on time for Kin as enough healing. Not to mention, he has to clear this whole board. And knowing that, Kin instead tries to roll for the Void Lord and he gets it, but this Fire Elemental is just gonna end the game, so very well played to Jason Joe there. He managed to overcome a Doomsayer, double Hellfire, and Defile hand from the Q block, and that has gotta be really impressive. If that doesn't make you believe in the power of even Shaman, I don't know what will. So congrats to Jason Joe. He beat the top ranked player so far in his group, and there's still a lot of matches to be seen today, so don't go anywhere, guys. back, everybody, to the regional qualifiers of the Hearthstone tournament of the 18th Asian Games. I'm Gia, and I am casting this next game between Surrender from South Korea and KKK from Macau. We are in the East Asia group stage, one of the bigger groups in this tournament, but of course the entire Asian region is being represented in this tournament, which kind of makes it unique, I gotta say, compared to other events in HCT where you might not see so much of players from Central Asia and South Asia and so on. The East Asian group, though, it's probably the most well-known in terms of the players that are part of it, and Surrender is a big reason for that. He had a really good performance at the World Championship in Amsterdam last year, and KKK, on the other hand, not so well known from Macau, but he did have to go through his own country's qualifier to make it this far, so can't underestimate the guy, although he has not had the best performance in the group so far. To be fair though, Surrender also has not been having the best luck in this tournament. I believe he was in the bottom half of the East Asian group when I checked a while ago, and that's just how it works with Hearthstone sometimes. You can't always predict the meta that well, and even though you have clean technical play, the cards have to fall into place as well as the lineups. And speaking of lineups, there is a difference in the druids for both these players. Surrender has the token druid, whereas KKK has taunt druid. And druid has been very, very dominant in the meta throughout tournaments recently, many different variants of it being playable, from Malagos druid to token druid and so on. So this matchup though, it's pretty rough, I gotta say, for the taunt druid, because if they're not able to get the early ramp quickly, they don't run spreading plagues, so they don't really have a way to deal with wide token boards, let alone if those boards have death rattle. And one thing we know well about token druid is that they only have to stick one or two boards, and then the buff from Power of the Wild, Branching Paths, and Savage Roar is enough to one-hit KO their opponent. So Surrender, like a really good druid player, grabbing the wild growth off the top, and he'll have Nourish on the next turn. KKK, however, unfortunately not running into any ramp here. He does have Oaken Summons for next turn to get something going, but it's not quite gonna be enough in the face of a wild growth Nourish. Surrender, instead of Nourish, choosing to go for Greedy Sprite here. I guess trying to get in some early damage, or perhaps saving the coin for Violet Teacher's synergy. It's also possible that he doesn't necessarily want to ramp with the Nourish, because drawing into the Whispering Woods and Soul of the Forest is of course one of the most important things in this matchup, but with the way the hand works out, I feel like I was gonna say that ramping up gives him more options with the Violet Teacher, but it seems it's more important to be drawing in. Anyway, he gets the ramp with the Greedy Sprite, so this makes sense as well. KKK can clear this out with a swipe. However, swipe is very important as a board clear weapon, so looks like he's just gonna go for the Wrath and Hero Power here. It's a little unfortunate that he couldn't use the Wrath for draw there, but I mean, given that he doesn't have that much to do with his hand later on, but he values the Ironwood Golem as not only pressure, but some kind of protection against whatever board comes next. Generally, the Taunt Druid just wants to survive board after board, and they have something of the means with Swipe and Primordial Drake, but this is the first push from Surrender, and yeah, only one swipe is available thus far. And even if KKK were to swipe this turn, Primordial Drake is not available until 2 turns from now. He doesn't know that Surrender doesn't have any buff cards in hand, but he's got to be kind of scared here. So the best he can do is remove 2 Wisps and their death rattles by hero powering 1 and then swiping the Treant that comes out, and then he can take down another Treant with the Ironwood Golem. I wonder if it's worth swiping at all though, because it's very little removal. He is dead to double Savage Roar, I think, but I wonder how likely he can think that to be in Surrender's hand. So in respect of Savage Roar plus something else, he decides to go for half of a clear and not really using a swipe. And I think I like that. It's a bit of a hedge. So Surrender hoping to draw into the Roar here. It's not quite available, but his minions and their death rattles are still intact, so he's got to be still feeling pretty good here. Man, these attack animations take really long and do very little. So Kakaka can set up one swipe now for a Primordial Drake clear, and he should have a pretty good read that there wasn't a Savage Roar in hand or Power of the Wild, because Surrender would have buffed last turn if he had it. And I think Kakaka just has to take the risk of swiping now to set up the Primordial Drake clear later. It also at least allows him to get rid of the Arcane Tyrant. It does mean that there will be 12 damage coming back at him from the other side of the board, but this is not a problem you can ignore. The Surrender has the branching paths to act as a pseudo Savage Roar here. It's not quite lethal yet, I believe. Oh, with the swipe. Yeah, never mind. It's 28. Even though it's not lethal, you still go for it because you gotta cash in that damage right now while you still have a board, and next turn he has the lethal with double swipe. So nice and clean from Surrender. Pretty simple depiction of how that matchup goes in general. The Taunt Druid, while it does have a few ways of clearing the board, the Token Druid has more ways of refilling, and the lack of Spreading Plague is just too much for the Taunt Druid to overcome. That's not to say that you should be including Spreading Plague in Taunt Druid. Obviously, you shouldn't because it dilutes the taunt pool, but yeah, you're just losing percentage in these kinds of matchups. And it goes to show how versatile the meta is, in that you can build lineups in so many different ways. It's very difficult to find one exact thing to target because just for Druid there's so many different archetypes available, and so you kind of have to get you either have to be really psychic in predicting what the field is going to bring, or just rely on technical play to get you as far as possible. Right, heading into game 2, it's gonna be the Miracle Rogue from Kakaka up against Even Shaman from Surrender. And I've heard some arguments about who is favored in this matchup. At first glance, it often seems like the Even Shaman should have a leg up because Miracle Rogue traditionally struggles with dealing with wide boards. But I've heard some casters saying that actually the Miracle Rogue has a better time of it because just swingy effects like Backstab SI are often enough to get you through the early game. Also, a very well-timed Firefly, such as this one off the top, is a huge deal. And then, as long as you survive long enough for 1 or 2 spiders to come down from Feldore, it's often enough to trade down the Shaman board to a point where they can never get it back. So Kakaka with Backstab and the Firefly trade can thankfully get rid of that Primal Fin Totem before it goes too wild. And you can also use the dagger for what it does best, which is clearing little Murlocs. It's also pretty important to note that the 1/1 roll of the totem is one of the worst ones for Surrender in this case, and little things like that can be a big deal in a matchup that relies so heavily on early board. Ooh, Kakaka can go for a pretty hefty sized Van Cleef here. Coin Flame Elemental Van Cleef. That is pretty greedy though. It's more important to deal with the board immediately in front of you. So I don't fault him for going for just this Eviscerate here. This is also the turn he expects Corpse Taker to be coming out, so saving the coin for Vile Spine also makes sense. So surrender, I mean Corpse Taker seems like a no-brainer, but there's something to be said for Flame Tongue and Hero Power, especially if he rolls Healing Totem, because the wider you go against a rogue, the more annoying it is for them. Whereas dropping single minions is much easier for the rogue to deal with, because they have Vile Spine Slayer and things like that. So no Healing Totem, unfortunately, but having the 3 minions is not only better for Sea Giant, but is also kind of more difficult for the rogue to deal with. So the spiders have been unleashed into the deck. And let's see how lucky Kakaka can get with how closely to the top they were shuffled. The ordering of the totems here says to me that Surrender wanted to possibly roll another Taunt Totem here. Which makes sense because there's a Flame Tongue on board. And the timing of his Corpse Taker makes it so that the Vile Spine coin came out without the additional value of the coin, and now the Auctioneer is a lot worse in hand. So little things like that from Surrender could help him in this matchup quite a bit. Because he's seen one Vile Spine now, he should feel a little bit more comfortable about playing Corpse Taker and later on Sea Giant.
Winter is here.
It's time for a little blood.
Surrender finding the perfect time to go wide on board now. Yeah, Kakaka can Vile Spine again, but it's wasting a prep. And this is a really bad use of resources for the rogue, and I wonder if he thinks he can win the value game this way by just continuing to trade. He does have control of the board, but the refill mechanics are getting less and less. He does have Elven Minstrel, but so far the only way to combo it in hand is by wasting a Van Cleef. And Surrender, having seen double Vile Spine now, should feel pretty good about slamming a Sea Giant. Okay, Hench Clan at least provides something for Kakaka to combo with Elven Minstrel that is kind of decent. And even though the Sea Giant is gonna survive on board, Kakaka is in a pretty decent spot. Just the fact that he has more minions than a Shaman is always a big deal. Surrender should probably go face with the Sea Giant before he hexes the Hench Clan Thug, and then he can Merc Spark the Vile Spine down, or perhaps the Elven Minstrel. Is there any merit to trading with the Sea Giant? Looks like he's going for it. I'm not sure how much I like this because he's seen double Vile Spine anyway, but I guess because the Sea Giant has 5 health, it makes it very awkward to clear. It's not just one Eviscerate that's needed to deal with it, so I don't mind it too much. So for Kakaka, I think the turn might start with Shiv. If you're going Shiv, Hench Clan, Thug, Van Cleef, it makes the most sense just to Shiv and draw first. That is his last spell in hand though, which makes her a very weak Auctioneer, but I feel like he'd have a decent shot at getting the board back by playing 2 minions. Okay, instead choosing to save the Shiv in hand, make a weaker Van Cleef, but still have a spell in hand for the Auctioneer. So this way, the Van Cleef doesn't quite challenge the Sea Giant, so I'm not sure I like that, but You can't really blame Kakaka because if you use this as a shiv there, it basically strands his whole hand because he can neither combo the Elven Minstrel nor activate the gadgets and Auctioneer. But yeah, now Kakaka is in a really rough spot. So Fan of Knives and Shiv combined with the Van Cleef attack can deal with the Sea Giant. But there's still a Flame Tongue Totem on board. So I wonder if you leave the Sea Giant up in this case. Take the value trade onto the Flame Tongue Totem. If he wants to clear both the Primal Fin Totem and the Flame Tongue Totem, I think he has to use both Fan of Knives and Shiv because you want the Van Cleef to be going into the Flame Tongue. I don't think it's that bad because you'll draw one off the Fan and one off the Shiv, and then you can play Elven Minstrel on top of it, so you should more than likely have some spells to combo on your Gadget San at the end of the turn.
Quickly.
So Faldori Strider over the Elven Minstrel is interesting. I think I like it because he already had one set of spiders in there, so just have and none of them had been drawn yet, so he was really likely to pull a spider off of the Shiv there, and he did, so that makes sense. Fire Elemental going straight to the face because it's just one short of being able to clear anything. And depending what Kakaka pulls next, he might have just turned the corner. This is the Auctioneer turn, I suppose. He can go for Blood Mage, Cold Blood, and Elven Minstrel. But yeah, he's quickly running out of spells, so... Alright, here come the spiders. Ooh, Fan of Knives off the top is insanely good, and Surrender knows it. So that's gonna be 1-1 for Surrender and Kakaka, and I guess I'm being proven wrong again in saying that even Shaman seems like it should be favored. Spiders, if you get to the turn where you're very much likely to draw into spiders, there's hardly any way the Shaman can come back. Even if they draw Hagatha, the spider's health total makes it very awkward. So for Surrender, that leaves his own even Shaman and he was the one who lost with even Shaman. That leaves, aside from the Shaman, his Q block that needs to get a win. As for Kakaka, he still has the Burn Mage and a Taunt Druid, I believe. And Burn Mage, I think, has been struggling for Kakaka throughout the tournament. I feel like it's a big part of why he has not been performing so well. The deck is not so well positioned in the meta. If you expect a lot of Q block, I guess it could be decent, but against other matchups, aggressive decks just run it over more quickly than it can get the burn together, so might be why he's been struggling so far. So Surrender gonna queue up the even Shaman again into Kakaka's Taunt Druid, and Surrender should be in a really good spot in this matchup. Corpse Taker being a big reason why Taunt Druid struggles so much against even Shaman, and Surrender has both of them in hand here, so this could get ugly real quick for Kakaka. He has the Wrath to deal with one of them along with his hero power, but also having drawn both Ironwood Golem when he has Oaken Summons in hand is very unfortunate. One of the biggest reasons that even Shaman is favored in this matchup is that the Taunt Druid, again, cannot afford to run Spreading Plague. So even Shaman is free to go as wide on board as they like, and Sea Giants can come down for cheap. And naturally the Taunt Druid struggles with dealing with big minions. They only have the Naturalizes to get them some kind of answer to those minions.
Winter is here.
Kakaka forced to just drop an Ironwood Golem here. I guess between having no Ironwood Golems and no Oaken Summons in hand versus having all three of them in hand, I feel like in this situation you might just take the Ironwood Golem because He absolutely needs some way to stop this pressure from Surrender, but the Earthen Might is really punishing here. And Surrender has a choice between playing the second one or the Merkspark Eel. Going for the Eel, I'd say, is slightly better against Naturalize, but it gives up so much damage to face. Potential, I mean, for the following turn, that I don't mind this. Also, a bigger deal is that the second Earthen Might puts the Corpse Taker out of range of a simple swipe clear with Spellstone. So the risk is going to pay off for Surrender, and the role of the Healing Totem, again, pretty significant because now it has to be swipe plus Spellstone and not just swipe. Wow, Kakaka just gonna give it up there. I was gonna say he could survive a bit longer with swipe, but I guess the second Corpse Taker tilted him a little bit too much. To be fair though, it was pretty unlikely that he could have taken it back from that point here. So Surrender now is in a very favorable spot, only has to win with his Q block now. It's a pretty tall order, to be fair, because it doesn't have the best matchup against Taunt Druid, and it does struggle a lot more against Burn Mage post-nerf, and that is a Mana Worm on one hand for Kakaka. Surrender probably gonna be looking for Hellfire, looking for Doomsayer. Generally, as the Q block, you just want to be able to stave off any minion damage from the mage. If you get to the point where it's only the burn spells from the mage, sometimes you can pull a win through, but it's still difficult because Dark Pact healing has been lessened so much. And unfortunately for Surrender, the hand is looking very clunky. And oh, never mind. Doomsayer, so good here, so good. Oh my goodness. So if all three Arcane Missiles land on the Doomsayer, and Surrender coin pings, and the Mana Worm is at 3 attack because of double spell, then the Mana Worm survives. But that is a 1 in 8, and we don't take 1 in 8s generally in Hearthstone, so it looks like it's just gonna be a ping pass. Ping and hit phase with Mana Worm turn for Kakaka. Does he feel that this Doomsayer is so game-changing that he needs to take the 1 in 8? I would be inclined to disagree. But that was a long time of hesitation. So Surrender, yeah, in a really good spot when the Doomsayer goes off and you have the Stonehill for follow-up. You gotta be feeling nice and comfortable. Although Surrender's thinking about the tap here because his follow-up on the turn after is not looking so good. I am in favor of just playing Stonehill Defender though, because it gives you some sort of board presence and you're kind of likely to get a taunt minion to play the turn after. Those are not 4-drops and below though, so a little bit unfortunate. So Kakaka feels very bad to have to develop your Sorcerer's Apprentice into a taunt like this. But there just wasn't much else he could do. The explosive runes also. I wonder about the decision to play Counterspell. Actually, it makes a lot of sense because this is both Spellstone turn and Hellfire turn. So Surrender is aware of this, and that's why he doesn't just go for the Spellstone onto the Sorcerer's Apprentice. I wonder if Kakaka will be still thinking about playing Explosive Runes. He can play it in this one window before Lackey is able to come down because of the nerfed cost. But if Surrender just doesn't play a minion that turn and then plays Lackey, then it could get a little bit tricky. So it might just be a Frostbolt ping turn and go face with your apprentice. Wow, all 3 missiles landed on the minions, so the Doomsayer could have died! Yeah, logic does not work that way. But, good use of Arcane Missiles, pretty lucky that the damage wasn't wasted either way. And the Frostbolt, you generally would rather have that in hand than Arcane Missiles, because that's always guaranteed to go face if you wanted to. So Surrender should be aware of exactly which 2 secrets these are, because that's all that Kakaka runs. And so he could put down the Giant, feeling pretty good. Much rather do that than just the Tar Lurker, because Tar Lurker would die to just a ping post runes. Kakaka looking desperately for some draw, and he gets it! That's pretty lucky. Draw into draw with an apprentice in hand. That's a good feeling. So he's gonna go for second runes. No fear of Lackey whatsoever. It's gonna get rewarded because it's not in hand for Surrender. And from this point on, I think Kakaka is pretty much set to win the game. Because now he can just go face. And almost any burn in his deck is enough to get him over the line. Surrender can only heal, what's this, for 8? And that's saying he has minions on board, and Kakaka probably is going to trade the apprentice. I know I said go all face, but that is an 8 too, and Life Drinker is a decent replacement.
An incredible discovery.
Alright, the all face plan is fine as well, because if Surrender wants to Dark Pact his Mountain Giant, that means it's not trading into a minion, so that makes sense. Yeah, Surrender looks pretty much locked out of the game. He can Defile to proc the counter spell. He can Spell Stone, and I mean, he can survive the next turn, but the turn after is the problem here. So Wax Elemental, the only thing that you really can afford to play here. It's also a decent Dark Pact target. But I feel like itself as a minion is healing you more health than being a Dark Pact target, because there's 2 minions on board for Kakaka, so I like this. Kakaka should feel just fine playing a Life Drinker and pinging. Is there a world where he polymorphs the Wax Elemental just so he can go face with no, rather you polymorph the Stonehill Defender and ping the Wax Elemental, and so you get the 3 damage with your Sorcerer's Apprentice. At this point, you're not really saving Polymorph for Voidlord, because when Voidlord comes down, you don't really expect to have minions anymore, or you expect to have enough burn in hand to win without any minion damage. So I actually don't hate the Polymorph, but I mean, just Life Drinker seems fine to me. So Surrender can clear with Defile, but there is still a counter spell on board. So yeah, it has to do it this way. And then he plays the Tar Lurker and hopes there is not even a Fireball in hand for Kakaka. There isn't yet, but this Life Drinker combined with the following few draws should be enough to get there. going for a Doom Guard instead, I think, actually makes more sense because in the world where your opponent doesn't have the burn yet, you want to beat them as soon as possible before they draw into the burn. And that's kind of the reasoning for just slamming Doom Guard on 5 a lot of the time in this matchup as well.
Incredible discovery.
Actually, no secrets left in deck for KKK.
Darkness.
And this is just gonna be a slow and gruesome trudge towards turn 10.
We have many secrets.
And I believe there is no way out of this for Surrender. He could draw into the second Spellstone and possibly survive one. No, he can't even because there's a Dark Pact. Counter spell. So even with that, it is just over. Surrender doesn't know this, of course, but it's more than likely that KKK has, at the very least, a Frostbolt. But again, we don't know Surrender as somebody to surrender prematurely, ironically enough. And so we're gonna be going to a Game 5 after a while. In this situation, Surrender's thinking, okay, if KKK draws only minions for the next, 6 turns, how do I win the quickest? Is it to just dump the Doom Guard first and possibly give up my Dark Pact? Yeah, I think it makes sense because the Dark Pact wouldn't have been able to activate anyway, so Surrender just wants to try and set up a lethal on the backswing. Unfortunately, that's not going to work. Actually, it's not unfortunate at all. He should have expected this. But Surrender, of course, is looking for any out possible. And if KKK had no burn, what was his best play? And I think he went for it. So, well played to KKK and to Surrender. And we'll be going into the last game, which will be the Q Block versus the Taunt Druid from KKK. It's kind of a shame that the Quest Warrior got banned out. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Quest Warrior is actually one of the funner decks to watch in this meta, I gotta say. Maybe it's just the slightly more aggressive player in me. Not that Taunt Druid is actually an aggressive deck, but in a meta where Taunt Druid is reigning and Malagos Druid, any deck that likes to push face damage, and is kind of straightforward in how it does it, rather than pulling off some big combo, is kind of a refreshing thing to see, in my opinion. So looking at the deck list for KKK's Taunt Druid, he has pretty much the standard thing. Only one Dragon Hatcher, double cube, and the whole Oak Heart package, of course. As we get farther into the meta, the lists are becoming more and more homogeneous, but the variety in deck archetypes is still pretty diverse, I gotta say. Alright, so no Wild Growth yet in hand for KKK, but the Nourish is there. More importantly though, Surrender has Mountain Giant in hand, and he is on the play, so that is gonna be quite a problem for KKK. He does have the Naturalize though, so that is one solace for him. The early turns in this matchup are pretty self-explanatory. Oh, Wild Growth off the top for Nourish next turn. Love to see that as the Taunt Druid. So it's just going to be that Nourish for ramp, Naturalize to get rid of the Giants, and Surrender will overdraw one card, but fortunately for him, he already has Gul'dan and Skull of the Manari in hand, as well as Lackey Impact, so not too big of a deal. Hellfire definitely one of the least relevant cards this early on, so Surrender also having picked up a Doom Guard is going to be pretty big, but the Coin Oak Heart is online, and Taunt Druid is doing Taunt Druid things. This is insane. Why is this fair? I used to say the same thing about Q Block, but now Q Block is getting just absolutely steamrolled. Yeah, and Surrender does not have a way to clear the Dragon Hatcher. So there's gonna be even more shenanigans coming. Okay, my bad. He does have a way. Sorry, Cube and Dark Pact. But Surrender instead choosing not to Dark Pact here. I wonder what the reasoning behind that is.
What if?
Is he perhaps hoping for a board state where Godfrey can come down and pop the cube to have double Doomguard? Okay, that is actually just lethal. What? How did this happen? Oh my goodness. Sorry, I'm kind of mind blown there. Kakaka takes the win with some, I guess, typical Taunt Druid shenanigans. Wild Growth Nourish, Coin Oak Heart for maximum value almost. Yeah. Congratulations. I mean, he was at the bottom of the group and just took out perhaps the most famous player in the group. And even though this is a round robin, which counts points, and he's still got a long way to go, it's gotta be a good feeling to be perhaps a less well-known player and kind of make it far against a player that has already proven himself to the whole Hearthstone community. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be seeing the next match pretty soon.
Welcome back everybody to the Road to the Asian Games 2018. This is the regional qualifiers for AESF, and we have quite the matchup for you. It's going to be Roger versus Kin, representing Taipei and Hong Kong. And we do have some interesting bans here. Shaman taken away from Roger, and it's going to be the Priest, interestingly enough, taken away from Kin. I think it's interesting that Priest is being brought anyway, but I guess it does have a place. We have seen some pretty good Priests around. Reminder, this is a best of 5 conquest format, and the deck lists are open, so people do know what their opponents are playing and they know how to mulligan around them. Roger does have the choice of his Hunter, his Druid, or his Warlock, and Kin has the choice of his Warlock, Druid, or his Warrior. I'm just going to take a look across at the deck lists, and there are some interesting variants, maybe some expected ones. I think the Warrior is the biggest surprise for me. I'm not sure how Quest Warrior, I believe it is Quest Warrior, fits in this current meta, but it can beat some decks, and I think it's all going to depend on how it actually counters Roger's lineup, for example. Looking across at Rogers, he has the Recruit Hunter available to him, the Taunt Druid, and then both players have the Q-Block, and actually both players have Taunt Druid as well. But I think it's about time we just jump into this game number 1, and we are going to kick off with Q-Block versus the Taunt Druid. Roger, of course, being the Q-Block, and Kin being the Taunt Druid, as you can see on your screens. Mulligan phase for this matchup. Fairly simple for both sides. I'd say for the Taunt Druid, you want to find that ramp. You want to find the ability to gain extra mana to get closer to playing those more impactful cards and being able to build a big board at some point that the Warlock is going to struggle with. However, for the Warlock, you're looking for really early game threats, to be honest. Mountain Giants, Doom Guards. That's going to be how you're going to win this matchup. It is a somewhat Taunt Druid favoured matchup. It's close, around maybe 54-55% in favour of Taunt Druid, but that is online statistics rather than tournament ones. And you've really got to look at how the players actually play the decks rather so than statistics sometimes, because if you do take an aggressive approach and you do manage to find some of those Mountain Giants and those early game minions, you can just run away with it, and the Taunt Druid can really struggle to get to a point where they even get any of the Taunt minions on the board. But with Wild Growth off the top, that's exactly what Kin was looking for. Oaken Summons available as well next turn, just to try and bring out one of those Taunt minions, thin the deck out ever so slightly, and put a threat on the board as well. Whilst Roger now is taking that aggressive line that I was talking about. Of course, there's no need to keep the ooze for any reason, no weapon you're going to be removing. We know there's no twig in these lists. But Kin does answer back. Now, the longer this does go, and if it does get into the late game, the value does favour the Taunt Druid. And Master Okar, I mean, that's a good card to get, especially if you've still got the Dragon Hatchet in your deck. It gets significantly worse if you don't, because we can see Hadronox is already in the hand as well. And there are times with this deck where Okar's not even played. But Kin respecting the aggression from Roger now and just putting things on the board that can compete. Not allow too much face damage to come out. No Skull of Manari available for Roger though. That would be another aggressive way of winning this game, just getting big chunky minions onto the board and being able to push that damage. But ultimately in this matchup you have to look at the total refill possibilities that are available for both decks. I mean, you have Gul'dan that is there for the Warlock, the Q-Block, but that is really the only one reactivation. Whereas on the side of the Druid, I mean, you can have 3, 4, 5 Hadronoxes in just one game. And Skull gets burnt as well. That is actually really significant. Kin recognizing the hand size of Roger there and saying, well, actually, I'm just going to burn some cards, because if he could burn Gul'dan, that gives him such a massive advantage in this game. And to be fair, burning Skull is pretty impactful as well, as Roger now is just throwing these Doom Guards on the board. And that's a Faceless Manipulator that got burnt, I believe. And Faceless Manipulator is a card that can make a pretty big impact as well in this game, to be honest, because you can, at some point, copy a Hadronox with it and get a Hadronox of your own. And then you're laughing, because you then have a chance to get back into the game, because all those Void Lords are going to be coming back. And look at that. That's why Okar is so powerful. Of course, he does have more power if you haven't drawn other minions early on. But I don't think Kin will be complaining. It puts a halt to Roger's plan and stops him from getting too much pressure with these Doom Guards. But the cube is going to add extra pressure. No silence abilities available in either side, I don't believe. I'm just looking through. No, one Spellbreaker is available for Roger. My mistake. But that doesn't really doesn't really affect Kin too much, because silencing one death rattle doesn't usually matter when Hadronox gets silenced, because you can usually just kill it off and bring another one back and then kill it off again. So Kin is just going to throw it onto the board now, continue this aggression. It's almost like he's seen how Roger is going to approach this game, and he's responded with his own way of saying, well, actually, I'm gonna go face as well. Speak of the devil and he shall appear, there is a Spellbreaker now available for Roger, but as I was saying, I don't think it really matters in this scenario. I think a Void Lord probably has to come down. Roger does agree. There were ways to kill off his own cube to get those Doom Guards back, but not without killing himself at the same rate. So now everything starts to get a little bit more tricky in this matchup. And look, A, look how quickly both these players have been playing, and B, look how quickly they've thinned through their decks as well. A game that traditionally could take maybe 30 minutes is actually being reduced just because of the speed of both of these players playing. And trades become a lot more difficult as well. You've got to think a few turns ahead, as Kin is just going to buff up this board. It is a relatively large board. Of course, you do have larger boards when you are playing Taunt Druid, but he's recognizing his power now, and he's saying, well, how actually is Roger going to get back onto this board at this point? If he's forced to use a refill like Gul'dan, then he's happy, because that's not the biggest refill that could be possible. But ultimately, this game going particularly well for Kin. And Roger still just getting as much as he can on board now with these Doom Guards. Really trying to answer the pressure that Kin has actually been able to apply here. Does have Spellstones, does have Hellfires. And I like this, the use of the Spellbreaker just to stop that first Hadronox getting its death rattle. Not the end of the world, as I'll remind you once again, because you can just kill it off and make another one. But it does halt Kin's plan ever so slightly. Has to rethink his strategy here, because suddenly this board has got a little bit scary from Roger. Swipe is available that deals with 2 of the Doom Guards. You can combine that with Hadronox to actually kill off all 3 Doom Guards. But instead, Kin is going to go down the alleyway of defensive taunts. Probably quite rightly as well. Both of these players will have played this matchup several times. They will know that if it goes to distance, the likelihood is Taunt Druid wins. So Kin doesn't need to get too aggressive, and if he does just play it slow, takes it calm, thinks about his turns, he should be able to come out with a win here. I think it could come down to how many Doom Guards we see from this Gul'dan. 3 or 4 have died already. We have seen a Void Lord die as well, and bish bash bosh. I guess, yeah, okay, this is great, getting all these Doom Guards out, if there wasn't any taunts in the way. But I think the big whiff is that Void Lord not spawning. Roger could have done with that. Reminder earlier, a Doom Guard being played on the board threw away a Faceless Manipulator. And a second Faceless was used onto a cube. So that means there isn't one for Roger to be able to Faceless a Hadronox if he were to get the chance at any point. And the frustrating thing when you are playing Cube Lock against Taunt Druid is this. You have such a powerful board, but you know full well that you make these trades, you clear everything, it's just going to come back to bite you in the bum again. The amount of refills is really crazy from Taunt Druid. I played a lot of Taunt Druid as of late on ladder, and it's a pretty consistent deck, both versus aggro and control decks as well. But Kin trying to work out the best approach here, because of course, even if he does kill off his own cube here, that is just going to be Hadronox's spawning, not actually the death rattle from Hadronox, which makes things a little bit more awkward. Because he does need to protect his life total. I mean, look at the amount of damage that's available for Roger. And the best way to do so is just to put 2 taunts up. Spellbreaker already gone for Roger, but double Hellfire is there as well, but unfortunately no way to use it without killing off his own Doom Guards. So Umbra plus Cube is probably the line of play, just to get even more Doom Guards, add even more pressure, and push that extra bit of damage to the face. And you kind of hope at this point that there's no way for Kin to kill off one of these Hadronoxi, whatever it's meant to be. Because if there's no way he can actually kill them, then suddenly it's looking pretty good for Roger. A lot on the board. Only the Sleepy Dragon available to be plonked on the board, so Kin is going to look for more answers. Spellstone will just about do it as well. That's absolutely perfect. You can use Branching Paths now to gain armor, to put that Spellstone to whatever you want, or you can use Oaken Summons. Doesn't really matter the line you go for. Combine that with a Swipe as well, and you can deal with some of this board, and then just put a big old wall in the way and frustrate your opponent. Roger's done so well to get to this point, by the way. If it wasn't for that Spellstone, then this could look very different. I think Kin would have taken a very deep breath when he was searching for a card. He would have known what was left, though. There were only 6 cards left. I believe a Naturalize is also in there. I think there might even be 2 Spellstones and a Naturalize that were available, so pretty good odds of actually finding a card that can kill off his own minions. May have even been a Wrath in there as well. Come to think of it, I think I've only seen 1. There might have been 2 though, but Kin will know. He'll be tracking it. Finally, Mountain Giants show up. A little bit too late for Roger's liking. He could have done with that on a turn 4 or a turn 5 play where Kin would have had to use a Naturalize to deal with it. And that is how this game can go. You can get Giants on board. The Naturalizes naturally come out to remove the big minions, and then sometimes you can generate enough pressure with your minions that Hadronox can't be killed off comfortably with just something like a Naturalize early on, and you manage to just break through before the wall is ever built. But now looking at Roger's hand and looking how Kin's played this one, that Spellstone is probably secured him this game. I'd certainly be feeling comfortable if I was on Kin's side. However, it's very different. I can see the hand of Roger, but he should have a fairly good idea of what's still available and what may be in the hand of Roger anyway. These players are very good at tracking hands nowadays. I say nowadays like they weren't back in the day. They've always been good. And the concede comes out. Roger does recognise the power, recognises that Hadronox being killed off again would just be too much. And we thought the amount of fuel that is in Taunt Druid was just overwhelming. As Kin goes 1-0 up here. Representing Hong Kong in these qualifiers. I'm sure he'll be happy to get a nice start to the series. It can be frustrating if you lose a game that you feel like you are favoured in. So I think that's probably how the players expected it to go. Either way, as it's Conquest, Kin now no longer can use his Druid. He has to move across to either his Warlock or his Warrior, whereas Roger still has the choice of any deck he likes, except of course the Shaman that was banned. So we'll see what he tries out here. And it looks like, yep, okay, we are getting a flip reverse. And we're going to get exactly the same matchup. It's still going to be Q-Block versus Taunt Druid, but for the other side. So let's imagine that a game again. But just for a different player playing it. And what I was saying in the previous game about getting aggressive and having the early minions, well, Kin actually does have that. That Mountain Giant is there. Faceless Manipulator's there as well, so there's potential for an 8-8 followed by an 8-8 over a couple of turns. And Roger hasn't done what Kin's done in finding any ramp, although I believe it was turn 3, Kin actually drew his wild growth, so Roger's going to be hoping for Lady Luck to be on his side as well. Alas, it's not, but it is mana. It is a nourish. So that's not going to be the end of the world. No naturalize to answer this mountain giant either. And well, there is wild growth though. No way to get the spellstone to deal with this mountain giant, so he's just going to have to soak up the damage that's going to be coming toward him now, and he's just going to double ramp. Now this is a completely different way of playing this game, just thankfully to the big minions that were available for Kin. Even though Roger has managed to find the ramp now, we've got to look at how the game went before. The Skull of Minari was burnt last game, no mountain giants were found. And yes, Doom Guards were just thrown onto the board, but Kin had already ramped up to a point where Roger couldn't answer it. But now the only way Roger can respond here is with, what, Dragon Hatcher? An Ironwood Golem plus Oaken Summons plus a Spellstone? Maybe that's the play. But you gotta look at Kin's hand. Like, he has a Doomguard, he has Hellfire, he has a Spellstone. And that Doomguard is going to be thrown onto the board by this weapon here, by the skull. Roger is doing just what he can here. Survives, is going to be able to clear off one of these mountain giants. If he chooses to. He's pausing. Some hesitation. I wonder why. Okay, that's interesting. That allows now for a definite 8 damage to be pushed through for Kin, if he would like it. I wonder why Roger has opted not to kill off one of these mountain giants. Maybe he just thinks that or he just thought that the golems were going to get the job done here, but now look at this. It's not just 8 being pushed, it's 16. Thanks to the Spellstone and the Defile. As I said, it was at least 8. And Roger will concede. So we've just seen 2 ways of playing this matchup. One way where you get the ramp and you're able to put those taunt minions in the way of the Q block and they don't have the big threats early on, but Kin has found that in both games. He's found the perfect way to beat their opponent. And all in all, the 2 mountain giants were too much. I don't know why Roger didn't use the Spellstone there. Maybe he was hoping to save the Spellstone potentially later to kill off a cube or something like that. Just saying, well, I'm not going to win this game, so I'll take a risk. Hope that my taunt minions can actually deal with it. And if they can, then I'm laughing. If they can't, well, I feel like I've lost this game anyway because of these 2 mountain giants and the Skull of Minari. I mean, you put Q block against anyone with 2 mountain giants and a Skull of Minari and you're probably going to lose, let's be honest. Maybe only a few aggro decks can actually break through that, but you've got to look at what Kin's hand was also offering. 2 Doomsayers, Defiles, Hellfires. He had a little bit of everything. And now, Kin being 2-0 up, does have his warrior to play with, and he needs to find a win. He's got 3 games to do so. But Quest Warrior typically doesn't do that well against Roger's lineup, just looking at it. Of course, it doesn't matter, really, the order in which Roger queues up his games now in this Conquest format. Ultimately, he just needs to win the rest of these 3 games to get the reverse sweep. But Kin will be wondering where he's going to get this victory. And Roger might be rubbing his hands together now because statistically, I mean, Recruit Hunter definitely does very well against Warrior. Q-Block does very well against Quest Warrior as well. Come to think of it, I think Taunt Druid also does too particularly well. So Kin might struggle here. However, that doesn't mean that he's not going to be able to get a victory, even if the statistics are against him. There's always that possibility of being able to find that 1%, as it were, to get the victory. If you are just joining us, this is the road to the Asian Games 2018. We're in the regional qualifiers and we're in the group of East Asia right now between Kin and Roger. Taipei and Hong Kong represented by these players. And with Kin going up 2-0, it does seem to have halted the speed of which Roger has been playing. And he is having a long old think about how he's going to approach this matchup. Probably wise of him, maybe take a toilet break at this point. Calm yourself. It's not really gone well for you. You've just lost. You lost a match that, yes, okay, you weren't favoured in, but then you have just lost a match that you are favoured in theory, because you've just watched your opponent do it to you. And Hearthstone is a lot about mental game. We all know that. So I do not blame Roger for just taking a little breather. But we are going to get straight back into it now. Game number 3. Quest Warrior, as I said. Running the Pixie, which is interesting. Haven't seen too many Quest Warrior lists nowadays running the Pixie. Naturally, we do see slightly different metas varying across different regions. APAC to Europe to Americas, we have seen some strange additions being added that may fit in certain metas but don't fit in others. We've got to look at Roger's hand. Skull of Minari is there, it's available. 2 Void Lords there, so they'll be popping out as of turn 5. So already, I mean, I said it in the previous game. If you get Skull and you've got Mountain Giants, you're looking comfortable, but I mean, just a Skull of Minari is always going to be difficult to deal with for any deck. Statistically, Q-Block around 75% win rate on ladder against Quest Warrior, so not the best matchup for the Warrior. And the trouble is, the Warrior can't really... Well, the Quest Warrior doesn't really have many early threats. Yes, okay, they've got those pesky Taunt minions that they can plop out on the board. As I say that, the big threat's coming from Roger now. He's got Skull of Minari and the Mountain Giant has arrived, so... I'm not feeling too good about Kin's chances. But a lot of these Taunt minions that are available for the Quest Warrior are quite small. I mean, look at Tar Creeper, Stonehill Defender. They're more defensive options rather than aggressive ones. And tools have had to come out already from Kin just to make sure that he removes this board. But because of this Skull of Minari, just extra pressure available from Roger. And things are going to go from bad to worse when that Lackey dies as well, because it's guaranteed to pull a Doom Guard. And there's a faceless manipulator available as well. And both players playing rapid. I've got to admit, I'm used to watching more European Hearthstone. I have casted a little bit of from this region, but I haven't seen players play this fast, this often, in a long time. We look at other tournaments as of late, and players roping almost every turn, but these players seem to have a clear idea of how they want to approach the game. And it's a simple game plan for Roger. It's put stuff on the board and keep hitting face and saying, I don't think you've got the means to deal with it all. And even if you do, I'm going to be able to bring it all back anyway. And the hand size of Kin just getting smaller and smaller as all removal having to be used. The silver lining is he does still have almost full health. And by going down, by being so aggressive, Roger, it means that he can at some point, if he wants, just kind of flip the switch and say, alright, the aggression's over now. We've now arrived at the late game. Can I just win through getting a ton of Void Lords, faceless manipulators, etc., etc.? The answer is probably yes. If he finds a Gul'dan at any point, then another Mountain Giant as well, another big threat. Roger might be tempted to cube this Doom Guard. Yeah, he is. You want to be putting yourself in a position now as the Q block where when Gul'dan is drawn, you give your best chance to be putting a lot of Doom Guards on the board. I've seen some tournaments where people get very unlucky, and I've seen 6 or 7 just Void Walkers spawned onto the board. You want to reduce those chances of that happening by making sure bigger and better minions are played. And there is the possibility now of facelessing this cube. Which is exactly what Roger's going to do. And I guess the speed of the players shows that maybe they feel there hasn't been too many turns to really stop and have a think about. I would disagree. Personally, I think there is always time to think in Hearthstone. But maybe this is a game plan from Roger to try and keep this game really quick. Maybe he feels like if he can force his opponent to play as quick as he can, then maybe he can get back into this series. And he has started perfectly with this potential comeback. He's now 2-1 down. And as we expected, the Q block just overrunning the Quest Warrior there. Too much early threats. Skull of Minari found. Mountain Giants found again. Lackeys pulling out those Doom Guards. Cubes available as well. All kind of fell into place for Roger, which is why he was probably playing so quick. He had his little break after going 2-0 down. Was able to think about everything. Compose himself. Can he get a reverse sweep here? Can he bring it back? He has his Druid and his Hunter available. Of course, we know that that Druid is the Taunt Druid, but the Hunter is a Recruit Hunter. And traditionally, the Recruit Hunter does very, 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 very well against Quest Warrior, certainly on ladder. In fact, I think it might be, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be Quest Warrior's worst matchup, according to online statistics. But the Taunt Warrior is pretty good as well. So we'll see which one is chosen. It is going to be the Recruit Warrior, so Roger feels like he wants to try and even up this series with his best chance at doing so. Seeping Oozling is already there in Roger's hand. We know how important that is to the deck. But sometimes with Recruit Hunter, you can just kind of draw into all of your big minions early on, and then suddenly these death rattles that are supposed to do so much damage just don't, because you don't have the minions to even be able to pull anything from those death rattles anymore. But that's not happened so far for Roger. And differently to the last game, Kin has a few more early game minions, and although I said that Stonehill Defender it's pretty weak in general, you can find bigger, beefier minions from Stonehill Defender, of course, and get that extra value. And there's always a chance, if you do finish your quest, if you do get Sulfurous equipped, the 8 damage, I mean, from your hero power, can be enough just to get rid of these massive minions that do come out from Roger's deck. Charged Devil Saws, King Crush, they all die. None of them have more than 8. Of course, if the Witchwood Grizzlies are pulled, yes, okay, they have more than 8 health, so that might come into effect if we even get that far, but there hasn't really been any early game dominance from Roger. And there very rarely is, I guess, for Recruit Hunter. The flanking strikes can make a big impact, but it's the fact that Kin's just been able to generate minion after minion and keep his hand at a healthy size as well. Keleseth found. I don't know how important Keleseth really is now at this point. Roger could probably do with finding a play dead or 2. Both would of course be optimal. But a brawl coming out is really important now for Kin, because it means he has an answer if a board does come wide from Roger. Are you silencing the Acolyte? Yeah, okay, silencing the Acolyte makes a lot of sense. Reduce draw potential from your opponent. and try and stay ahead on board. And this is the thing, even though Kin's been playing minion after minion, Roger has the board back. Straight away, just like that. Because these minions have just been small, useless, really, just blockades. But what's important is at the bottom of your screens, that 4 out of 7, make that a 5 out of 7 now. I remember back when Quest Warrior first came around, Sulfurous, if you found it and you got it out by turn 9 or 10, you did just have a chance of winning the game. It doesn't particularly work well against Death Rattles, and that's why I guess this is such a favoured matchup for the Hunter. And I have to say, I do question Quest Warrior being brought to this tournament. I think I might have said it before, but I will say it again. That being said, this game certainly hasn't gone southward very quickly. Kin has stayed in it to a point where Sulfurous is going to come into play as of next turn if he would like. There's that Pixie that we were talking about last turn as well. That means that at some point you can hit for 16 damage in one turn. Of course, that 16 damage is random, and you don't know where it's going to go. But that might be important when there's a King Crush and 2 Charged Devil Saws, for example, just staring at you with their dino eyes. There is Charged Devil Saw number 1. I guess one of the benefits about getting the Devil Saw out now is it doesn't get the charge effect and doesn't get the impact. And also by killing a Death Rattle, it means it makes play dead less likely to be able to affect you. With Katrina also being on the board, I'm not sure Roger's too concerned, as now the pressure is really rising. But Brawl is there. Warpath available as well. I mean, you can Brawl and then hope that your hero power now hits what comes out of it. Because even though this Recruit Hunter does have some massive threats, it does run out of those threats quite quickly. Unfortunately, the Death Rattle minion survives, but Kin's hero power goes in the right direction. It goes face. And that is also something that can happen. The hero power can just go face over and over and over again. We've seen it before, but with Roger having Fireflies, Saronite chain gangs, he can build this board as wide as he likes. Now he's seen one Brawl. Hope there's not a second one and say, alright, well, surely your hero power has to hit one of these minions, but we can see Warpath there as well. There is the option of Acolyte first if you wanted to. I guess by Warpathing first, it means you can deal with 3 of these minions, and then you can hero power the surviving one. Or it can go face again. You never really know. If it hits the minion, it's probably not the end of the world, but the Witchwood Grizzly being drawn is somewhat of an issue. Because, of course, it has more than 8 health. Yes, Stalker Rexar picked up, and that's probably good timing now, because Roger is slightly running thin in his hand. Maybe he plays Devil Sword this turn, thinks about Rexor next turn. But you could go at this turn, and then you could build a Beast. But just putting the Devil Sword on the board does make sense, as Kin well and truly does have his back against the wall now. He's just going to start with a hero power. Yeah, not the best, but he does have the Pixie, so this is the big turn. The turn where he got those 2 chances of Die Insect, and then he hits the Devil Sword. Okay. Oh, this game is actually going right to the wire. For a matchup that is so heavily favoured for the Recruit Hunter, Kin's very impressively staying in this, and has the chance of winning. No way for Roger to push through lethal damage this turn. But can get bloomin' close. Hero power plus Rexar, plus the minions on board. He's going to chunk Kin down a considerable amount. But he has to think about protecting his life total as well, and I think Rexar probably makes sense because of that. Or we can go down the route of just going wide. Play a Tar Creeper, play a Firefly, a Flame Elemental as well. And suddenly these quick turns have slowed down ever so slightly as now Roger realizes of, oh, actually, I do have a chance of winning this game. I just really need to think about how these next couple of turns are going to go. How can I optimize my chances of staying alive and not being hit by this Die Insect hero power? And I'd imagine these little raptors are going to go face. Okay, he's just going to kill off. He is worried about whirlwind effects that we know are available. We can see Garrosh is there in hand, but you don't really want to be changing this hero power if you're Kin. I think your win condition probably is just this hero power. And actually now with the armor being drawn and Reckless Flurry available, you can go all out here. How comfortable are you at 4? You've seen the hero power disappear from Roger, so you're just hoping for no charge minion. And you can guarantee 8 damage to face. You put your opponent down to 8, which means your next shot could kill him, depending on what he puts on the board. Kin could win the series next turn. Oh, but Saronite Chain Gang is good. You can go wide now, Roger. And of course he can build a beast. Any sort of healing would be ideal for him, but I didn't see any. And you've got to remember, Garrosh does come with a weapon as well. So there is that burst potential at any point. Hero power plus Garrosh. Roger. Yeah, just going to do what he can. 4 minions. 4 minions, and you think should be enough. So a 1 in 5 to win the game for Kin. And actually, what a win it would be. Especially considering I played down the chances of Quest Warrior against Recruit Hunter. You can draw first to see if you can find anything that can help. I think he's used both executes. Yeah, Blood Razor's not going to matter. And you are dead if you miss, I guess. I suppose you can play Phantom. Play a couple of Phantoms afterwards. But here we go, 1 in 5. No, hits the Saronite Chain Gang, so you're going to have to go for the backup plan of Taunts. You do just about stay alive, but you are very scared of that Zombeast. What has Roger built? And what can Roger build following is Lich King being drawn. That's a big draw for Roger because he might be able to find a very impactful card coming out of Lich King. But we are going to start the turn building a beast. Lifesteal is good. And that's exactly what Roger's gone for. But not opting to play it this turn. Instead, the 9/9 Lich King, a minion that can soak up potential damage. And now this board is getting a little bit too big for Kin to deal with, because even if he hits the Lich King, or even if he hits... I think he has to just go for it. Does he have to just... Okay, armor can get you a little bit of armor. Kill off one of the minions, and then a 1 in 4 to win the game. That's so unfortunate for Roger. That is so unfortunate for Roger. I mean, credit to Kin for winning a very unfavourable matchup, but Roger had that so close to bringing back and taking that to a game 5. He did everything right, but at the end of the day, the hero power has done it. That 8 damage coming out from Sulfurous, generating the hero power. Congratulations to Kin, who gets the victory for Hong Kong. Welcome back, everybody, to the Road to the Asian Games 2018. This is the regional qualifiers, and we're going to be in the group East Asia for this matchup of T-Red's Red versus Jason Joe. Red having his Druid band, and Jason Joe also having his Druid band. We do have a Rogue available for Jason Joe, as well as Paladin and Shaman, whereas for T-Red, it's a Warlock that is available. Red representing Japan, of course from Japan, and Jason Joe from China. It is a best of 5, it is Conquest. And just looking over the decks, there are a few differences, especially when we come to, I guess, mirrors, with both Paladins being available, both Shamans being available. It is, of course, Odd Paladin as the choice for both players. Whereas Red has slightly different odd paladin, not opting for any silence. Instead he has 2 abusive sergeants in there, and a double blessing of might. Very, very, very aggressive. Whereas Jason Joe has gone for the more traditional list, I'd say, with dire moles in there, glacial shards, Ironbeak Owl, Leroy Jenkins available that isn't available in reds. So some differences. Elsewhere, red having his Druid Band, which was a token variant. He has his Even Warlock available, and an Even Shaman. Both players, I think, have Even Shaman. Yes, they do, but we're going to kick things off with game number 1, which is going to be Even Shaman on the side of Jason Joe, but it's going to be Even Lock for red. A match that does favour the Even Lock. Statistically, quite heavily, actually. Mainly just because the speed of which the Even Lock can get some big taunt minions on the board. And the Even Shaman really struggling to deal with those. That being said, the Even Shaman does have the potential to snowball out of control as well. A lot of early pressure can just be found from totems and buffs on those totems, like Direwolf Alpha that you can see, Earthen Might available if you want it. And the Even Shaman has kind of found its way to become a more even elemental shaman. I kind of like putting it. Mainly because I played a lot of Even Shaman and I guess that was before this variant became popular. Corpse Taker being there available with Alakir in the deck, Kalamos is there. It does do very well in this meta actually. To be honest, both these decks do. Even decks have really shone in this meta, mainly because you just have a guaranteed play on turn 1. Whether that's just tapping for more cards, getting more resources, or just sticking a simple totem on the board. I mean, a 0-2 totem can quickly, as you see, become a 1-2. And a 1-2 for 1 mana, I mean, we've seen decks play that in the history of Hearthstone. And now another buff available. Flame Tongue is there for Jason Joe if he would like it. Of course, Jason Joe, a very well-known name in Hearthstone. A lot of accolades to his name. Very successful every time HCT rolls around, he's always there. Always seems to make it and qualify. On the other side for red though, this is a real chance to prove himself against a player who is very well known. And really show what he is made of. Both Mountain Giants are there for red. And at least there's a tool to remove them. Hex is available. And with a Reaver drawn as well, that means that red is just tapping himself into the ability of playing some of these minions that really benefit from low life total. And I wonder whether this Twilight Drake is enough to bait out this Hex. I don't think it is. I think we're more likely to see a Saronite Chain Gang now that's been drawn. And even Shaman really does perform well because of its battle cries. Some really impactful battle cries that are available. I mean, Fire Elemental is just a crazy card as it is. Does always show up in the meta here and there. Disappears sometimes. Sea Giant available as well. This could be really good if a Sea Giant can come onto the board. And that might be a way that Jason Joe can answer potential Hooked Reaver or a Mountain Giant. But with Hellfire now right on time, you can say goodbye to your board, Jason. And say hello to your opponent now, starting to really gain an advantage. The red won't be too concerned about his life total. He has the Spellstone available that has been buffed up thanks to Hellfire. Has Defile here to deal with this Fire Elemental if he would like. So I wouldn't mind a Defile plus Mountain Giant play, or maybe the Hooked Reaver instead. And there is a decision of a Black Knight being teched into the deck as well, which very appropriate in this meta. And when we look at the amount of Taunt Druids that are around, we can really get some work done. I mean, even against even Warlocks. Even. You can make it even Stevens. Do you just use the Spellstone, maybe? Depends what kind of approach Red wants to go. It does look like, yes, he's going to get a bit of life total. It does mean that now the Hook Reapers aren't going to get that buff. But I guess the more safe approach. Fire Elemental number 2 now will arrive, and maybe Red will go back to the idea of potentially using Defile here. Although that 0-2 is a bit of a nuisance, actually. It's just going to protect this Elemental ever so slightly, but now both Mountain Giants arriving on the board, and only one real tool of removal. And this has been a very fast-paced game from both players, but it's looking like it's going to go in Red's favour, because he doesn't really have a way of pushing damage, and he doesn't really have a way of answering this entire board either. Maybe the Earthen Might onto his Fire Elemental here, just to look for a little bit more value. No, he decides not to. Maybe wanted it for a trade instead, but 8-12 available now for Red. No lethal available though, no double Hellfire shenanigans. We've already seen one Hellfire. He's going to tap and look for extra options though, and I think just putting 2 Hooked Reavers onto the board is probably going to be enough to kill this game off, let's be honest. Yep, Jason Joe sees them, and he realises that the concede button is definitely a good choice. Red goes 1-0 up. As I said, this will be great for Red to get a victory against a very well-known player. Admittedly, I don't have as much on Red. I'm sure he is a very fantastic player as well. I don't think anyone can deny the success that Jason Joe has had in Hearthstone. And anyone toppling him, even another great player, it's always going to be something to shout about. It is a best of 5 conquest, and it does mean that Red is all complete with his Warlock. So he moves across to Shaman or Paladin, and it's a good start for him. Both players playing very fast again. I am very surprised at the speed of which these players are playing, but sometimes you just want to get a game finished. I'm okay with that. You've got things to do, people to see. I'm sure they're both very popular. I'm just looking through the deck list here and trying to analyse the kind of approach that both of these players have gone for this tournament. Very aggressive lineup from Jason Joe. The Token Druid, the odd Paladin, the even Shaman, and then the odd Rogue as well. And with the Druid gone, I mean, that's just 3 decks that are really looking to gain early pressure and just outvalue their opponent. On the side of T-Red, Red, you can see that it's a somewhat similar story. He's got the Paladin as well, he has the Shaman. The only difference really is that even lock, and I really like bringing an even lock to this tournament. Even lock right now just is really difficult to counter. It has good success rate against most other decks, and that's what makes it so viable right now. Plus, it absolutely destroys Odd Paladin, so if it destroys Odd Paladin, then why wouldn't you bring it? Game number 2, then, is going to be Odd Paladin versus Odd Paladin. So a chance for Jason Joe to get back in the series, but he has to win a mirror, and I say a mirror with some air quotes that you can't see, because as I explained right at the start of the series, there are considerable differences in these deck lists. Jason Joe, for example, running Leroy Jenkins, but Red isn't. Red running Abusive Sergeants, Jason Joe not. Purifier's Maul found is really good for Jason. Purifier's Maul on both sides, actually, as I take a glance to the top of the screen. Whoever can get a board early and get value from that Purifier's Maul first and get the trades off, hate to say it, probably wins. But at least it's not a scenario where one player gets Purifier's Maul and the other doesn't. That often happens in Odd Paladin mirrors. And instantly Jason Joe saying, well, I'm not going to be trading here, I'm just going to go face. You can do the trades.
The light dim.
Righteous Protector is going to now protect some of these minions from red, and I was saying about the Purifier's Maul. Well, Jason Joe does have the first chance to play it, but there isn't really that much value there because of it. So instead he might just be opting for a simple hero power here. But I say that. He's saying, no, I want the value for now. I want to get the trades. I want to reduce my opponent's minions as best as I can. But red has the perfect answer for it. His own Purifier's Maul of his own. It's pretty much the only player he could play. Imagine you keep 2 Divine Shields and you use your face for one of these minions. Judging by the big red arrow on the screen, Red does agree. And now it's about trying to get back onto this board for Jason. Yes, okay, he can kill off one of the 1/1s with his hero power, which does mean that then the Corridor Creeper gets cheaper. And he can plot that on the board as well. But with 2 Corridor Creepers available for red, and then a Fungal Mancer to follow up as well. And now it's lost in the jungle as well. Oh, it's just a perfect draw for red. In such a commanding position. Blessing of Might's doing very little. Veteran's doing very little. Divine Favor, we know that's doing nada right now. Purifier's Maul, double Corridor Creeper, double Lost in the Jungle, I believe, as well. And then a Fungal Mancer to get real value. I mean, often it can be whoever gets level up first, whoever gets Fungal Mancer first in the mirror. And that's the first card that we've seen that is different in the lists so far, so it's not really like the lists have really made a difference. Dire Mole being there, it's not in Red's list though. Red has Abusive Sergeants instead. I don't really think an Abusive Sergeant would make that much difference in this scenario. I guess it might help you kill off a Creeper. Jason Joe just taking a look at his options. What can he trade into? Kill off 2. I imagine you're probably killing off 2 of the Silverhand Recruits. Mainly because you're concerned about level up just finishing this game off. But with Blessing of Might being applied to one of the Corridor Creepers, maybe it's going to be a second Corridor Creeper killed. First Corridor Creeper killed, should I say.
Move quickly.
Last minute decision of no, actually I don't want level up to be punishing me, but it's not going to be level up that's going to be punishing you, Jason. It is going to be a Fungal Mancer, and that Blessing of Might is going to be wasted. I understand why he used it though. The option of next turn playing a card plus using Divine Favor potentially to try and get value, but Stonehill Defender is not where you're going to get the value, because it's going to generate another minion that you cannot play either. Sleepy Dragon's going to be way too slow, and Stegodon or the Shield Master, I don't think it really matters at this point. I think this might be red going 2-0 up, to be honest. There's that Abusive Sergeant that I was talking about. He can now so comfortably burst through this board. Does find another Maul. I believe I saw that was just Taunt. Yeah, it was just the Sacred Maul. It's not as much value as it would be if it was the Battle Cry give +1 attack or the Purifier's Maul, but either way. We're probably going to a game 3 now. You need a miracle if you're Jason Joe, and we know there's no miracles in the deck. It's not a deck that runs Consecration, obviously. It's not like Paladin used to be, where you had that possibility of Pyromancer plus Equality to get back into the game. But Stegodon does at least delay the inevitable.
The light dims, but we fight.
Does pose a little bit of a threat to red. I just think he is too far ahead, and with Vine Cleaver being found as well. Well, if he wasn't far ahead already, now this most definitely will put this game to bed. I wouldn't be surprised if Jason just concedes after seeing the Vine Cleaver. I know I would.
For duty.
It's such a frustrating mirror to play, because if you do get into this scenario where you are behind and you just know there's literally nothing you can do. The Stegodon plus the Defender was the last-ditch attempt. The Divine Favor that's just been stuck in Jason Joe's hand throughout this entire game is going to be used to draw just one card. And it's a Blessing of Might as well. Double Blessing of Might is interesting. Both players running Double Blessing of Might. Certainly lists that I'm used to seeing only run the one. But anyway, Red is going to go 2-0 up now. Still playing extremely fast, but everything kind of went his way there. Sometimes in that mirror, you do just have to hope to get the Divine Shield on Purifiers more, but both of them did get it. But it was that Fungal Mancer that really made that difference. The first real buff card that was available for either player was able to swing the game heavily in Red's favour. And then to put the icing on the cake, it was the Vine Cleaver that finished it off. A bit of an age difference between these two players. Jason Joe nearing on 30 now. We do have Hearthstone players that are kind of in their 30s. And we do have players that are as young as like 16, 17. And when you look at Firebat, when Firebat was winning tournaments, I think he was only around that age. But I'd say their probably average age is around 24, 25. But Red from Japan has one deck left, and it is his Even Shaman. I think I've already stated that Even Shaman does pretty well in this meta against a lot of decks. It's not particularly easy to counter. So Red should be feeling confident, just having to get that one win. But how many times in Conquest have we seen a 2-0 suddenly end up at 2-2, and then the opponent winning 3-2 and getting the reverse sweep? It happens a lot. And that is why the format is so exciting. Doesn't really matter, I don't believe, which deck list Jason Joe goes for. I suppose there might be an element of, well, I guess there is, sorry, there is an element of tiebreakers in these groups, so a 3-0 is going to be considerably worse than a 3-1. So maybe there is reason to play your best chance at getting a game win. Here we go, game number 3. And Jason is going to stick with his Odd Paladin. So Odd Paladin versus Even Shaman. This is slightly favoured for the Odd Paladin. Close though. A very common matchup that you will see on ladder nowadays, I believe. But it is cards with those battle cry effects like the eel. Double eel for red. It's actually really good here, because it can clear off some of these minions that Jason's going to put early on. And if around the turn 4, turn 5 mark, when really big minions, like threatening minions, turn 6, Fire Elemental can come onto the board, etc. It does get increasingly hard for the Paladin, but Purifier as Maul is there, so's Fungal Mancer, so the right tools are available for Jason Joe to win this game. But by playing double Dire Mole here, he is playing into this eel. Naturally, you think you are pretty comfortable against any buffs that could have come onto the totem, but the Merkspark Eel does change that. One of my favourite cards that was released in the latest set. Just being able to do that 2 damage and really pressurize your opponent. People didn't really know where it was going to fit in as well. Would Even Shaman actually be a thing? And I think Even Shaman has showed that yes, it is a thing. But Jason Joe gets a buff of his own and actually says, well, I can answer the eel. I don't care if you've got double eel to deal with my minions. But it does mean this 4-1 can be comfortably cleared off now. Little value going to be found from this first Purifier's Maul. Not just yet. Anyway, Baku is not what you want to be seeing. You don't mind seeing it later on, I guess, but right now you needed something else. A 1-drop would have been much preferred. But often the hero power is just enough from the Old Paladin. That's why this deck is so strong, because the constant barrage of minions that arrive on the board can be very difficult to deal with. What I was saying about big impactful minions on the turn 5-6 mark, well, there's Fire Elemental, there's Argent Commander available for red. But now this is the turn. This is where Purifier's Maul can get some value. Unfortunately, it's not loads. The trades aren't fantastic. You can use them all and then trade in your face to a 2-3 and then use everything else to kill the other two Saronite Chain Gangs. But still leaving minions alive. Ultimately, Jason Joe just really wants minions to survive, so there may be the option of not trading here. Okay, that's fair enough. Not trading because you want to make sure Fungalmancer is going to get its full value here. Which it is going to, but the pressure is now really arriving from red. Just finding a lot of these 2-drops that can be thrown onto the board that are going to be hard to compete with. What's good against 2-drops that are 2-3s? Well, I guess 3-3s with Divine Shield is pretty tasty. But with Jason Joe spending so much time removing the board and trying to fight for the board, it is going to allow for cards like Argent Commander and Fire Elemental to really make a difference here and really swing this into red's way. And start swinging it to a potential 3-0 actually, if he is able to take this one. I've got to say, he's in a pretty good position to do so, just looking at Jason Joe's hand. Jason Joe could do with surviving a turn, finding, as I say, it's finding something like a Vine Cleaver. That's really important, actually, to be able to try and get back on the board. Can you find anything significant from this Stonehill Defender? No. I guess a Hungriette and the 2-drop might be able to be answered by minions that are already on board. Jason Joe really starting to struggle, and you've got to say, if something more significant other than Baku had been found, then he might have been able to stay a little bit more heavily on board. Earthen might be picked up as well. That's even more value now for red. I guess Earthenmite plus Flametongue Totem actually looks a little bit better mana-wise, because you might be able to find an elemental that works out. And yes, okay, the Tar Creeper does work out absolutely perfectly. What an incredible generator card that is for him. Not only does it fit the mana curve, but it also is perfect for this matchup because it's going to soak up so much damage and, most importantly, protect that big 8/7 Fire Elemental that's available. At least the Vine Cleaver is there, and then there is always the option, there is always the... This is why odd piling can be good, is because now you're going to be looking at least 4 Silverhand recruits being generated every turn. That means a level up at any point is very scary. And we may just see... So there is the option that red could just go face here, right? If you wanted to put himself behind Lich King. Or you can trade into both of these 1/1s and really put this game to bed. And red is going to do exactly that. And Jason Joe has already seen it. He's seen the lines. He saw the red arrow pointing. And he concedes. Red takes the victory 3-0 over Jason Joe. A very quick series. And one I think that Jason Joe will want to forget. And he can move on. But this is a really well played game from red. Congratulations to him. The man from Japan finding the victory, 3-0. Welcome back everybody to the 18th Asian Games Regional Qualifiers, the road to the Asian Games. My name is Dan Gaskin, I'll be guiding you through this one. And boy do we have a good one. It's Roger versus Surrender. It's a best of 5, it's Conquest. I think you know this. But it means if you win with one deck, you cannot play with it again. You have to win with every single deck. Players are bringing 4 decks and 1 is banned. As you can see on your screens, for Surrender, he had his Shaman banned away. And Roger has his Warlock banned away. This is an open decklist format, so players do know what they're going up against and they can strategize their bans around that. So it is Surrender's Even Shaman being banned away. Not surprisingly, I guess, because it is a hard deck to counter. And Roger losing his Q block. So instead that leaves Roger left with his Hunter, his Druid, and his Shaman, and Surrender has his Warlock, his Druid, and his Paladin. Now Paladin, of course, we know one of the strongest decks around right now, but that being Odd Paladin, of course. However, there are tournament lineups that do try and counter Odd Paladin. And perhaps that's why Quest Warrior is showing up every now and then, because statistically Quest Warrior does pretty well against Paladin, but that's not going to be there for Roger anyway, so we needn't have that conversation. But when a deck is the most popular deck around, sometimes people do try and design particular tournament lineups just to counter it in everyone, because of course in Conquest that Paladin is going to need to find a win. Anyway, enough of my rambling, it's time to jump into game number 1. We're going to be starting things off with the Token Druid of Surrender going up against the Shudderwock Shaman of Roger. And we're looking already, you can see Wild Growth available for Surrender, so that's good, just being able to ramp up. Whispering Wood's a really important card later on. Spreading Plague, not going to be too much of a factor in this game. And it's just going to be the Wild Growth kept for Surrender. This is a favourable matchup for the Token Druid. And actually, Token Druid has been banned away a lot in a lot of tournaments recently. I wouldn't be surprised if it's banned a lot in this tournament too. But alas, it's been left up, and that means that Surrender can really get aggressive against this Shudderwock Shaman that typically can struggle. Purely because even though Roger and the Shudderwock Shaman are going to have plenty of removal options available, sometimes the Death Rattles are just too hard to get through, leaving a board up for the opponent to beat you down with a Savage Roar a little bit later on. So Surrender's going to be trying to bait out those removals as early as possible with the use of things like Violet Teacher, for example, and then hopefully be able to stay alive long enough to keep a board. But things are looking pretty good for Roger in terms of what he's drawn so far. He has card draw, which we know is the second most important thing to find. Some would argue the first, but I guess any board control or aggressive deck, you've got to find that removal. But Mind Control Tech being there, that's a good answer to any sort of wide board. Life Drinkers are there, that's some of the battle cries, and most importantly, Shudderwock is available. So providing you find the other tools, the other battle cries, you know that there is a chance that come turn 9 or 10, you might just be able to do the deed. And there is another piece of that puzzle with Zola arriving as well. Does Roger's deck run Hemet is the real question, as I browse my notes. Yes, it does. So now with Zola being drawn and a Healing Rain available, a Hemet would be a perfectly viable play to make, destroying the majority of the deck, all but about, what, 6 cards? Making it increasingly likely for you to win the game in those 6 turns. But no Hemet is available for Roger, as meanwhile Surrender is just doing what he can with the hand he's been given. It hasn't been the best of hand. He started well with the Wild Growth, but he could have done with the Greedy Sprite a little bit earlier. And this is quite a common theme we see with Zola, the Glacial Shard being such an effective tool. Opting to freeze the face so that the hero power can't get the value. In this instance, maybe he wasn't expecting Malfurion to come out anyway. So instead, the token is just going to be used to kill off the 2-1. But already, Surrender's starting to go wide. But there are answers in hand for Roger. Volcano is there. Saronite Chain Gang now being picked up. I mean, a lot of these battle cries have already been found. If we find another Saronite Chain Gang, another Grumble, and then the first Grumble, sorry. And all the pieces are there. And with Healing Rain available, Volcano too. This game's looking alright for Roger. Albeit an unfavoured one. Certainly when online statistics come to play in ladder anyway. We all know that tournament play can differ. Players are usually better when it comes to tournament play than on ladder. Usually there's a lot more focus there. A lot more note-taking, a lot more thought process, rather than sometimes, I don't want to say all the time, sometimes on ladder people can just kind of go into an autopilot. All those statistics that are available are going to be also including people that might just be on their phones whilst they're traveling, for example. So all that has to be taken into account with any statistic. So with 2 Violet Teachers now on the board for Surrender, this Wrath and Power of the Wild does look very tempting, but you are using a lot of resources and you are playing heavily into removal. And he'll just be counting up. He'll say, how much health am I going to have in total? In theory, he should be above 15 if he uses Power of the Wild as well and then makes trades. And that is quite the board. Double Volcano, though. I think you just use one. You use one to remove, and then you say, well, next turn I might be able to use another one. Both Violet Teachers surviving, though, unfortunately for Roger. Ultimate Infestation being a very warm welcome to the Hand of Surrender, as he uses his first Savage Roar just to, whilst he can, provide a little bit of a beatdown. Do as much damage, really put the pressure on Roger now. But Volcano number 2 is going to be able to clear this board. You follow that up next turn with a Healing Rain and a Life Drinker. If mana allows it. Actually, I don't think it would. And now as Roger, you're just hoping there isn't an Ultimate Infestation. And this Ultimate Infestation is going to slam into face and put Roger down to 1. And an Arcane Tyrant was quite likely to be pulled anyway, but it had been drawn off the top. Which does mean a 4-4 can also go on the board, which is really good for Surrender. And this is looking nice, but you've got a Healing Rain, so you can now chunk back up. Another Healing Rain available. Life Drinkers are there. Grumble is available. We've seen Zola be played. We've seen Glacial Shards be played. So actually there is a potential option that Shudderwock could just come out as a I need to immediately answer this board kind of scenario. There's been no Hagatha yet, so Hagatha's not going to be able to deal with any removal from a battle cry. But this is the danger that I was discussing right at the start of the game. All these death rattles, how on earth do you deal with them? And the answer is you don't, really. You have a Mind Control tech. You could Farsight and find a Lightning Storm, but even the Lightning Storm's not going to do the job. But Roger is going to start with a Farsight anyway, just to see what he gets. And just like clockwork, Lightning Storm is available. Mind Control tech first, doesn't take one of the big minions. And yeah. Lightning Storm isn't going to be doing anything, so Roger's just going to concede. And I guess as we expected, the Token Druid finding the win where it should find the win. Roger did find double Volcano, double Healing Rain, and that really shows the power of Token Druid in that matchup. How it can just build a board consistently and constantly. At the beginning of the best of 5 goes to Roger. Goes to Surrender, my apologies. As he's 1-0 up now with his Druid. Means he has to switch over to his Warlock or his Paladin. And his Warlock is a Q block. His Paladin, we know, is the odd Paladin. Q block going into a Shudderwock Shaman is an interesting matchup. And what else is available for Roger? His Hunter. So we could see Q block versus Recruit Hunter later. We could see Q block versus Taunt Druid later. That's also available for Roger. Pretty good matchups for Surrender, really. So he should be feeling confident after that game 1, as game number 2 is now underway. And Roger is going to stick on that Shudderwock Shaman. Surrender moves across to his odd Paladin. Another matchup that we see heavily on ladder. Another favoured matchup for the aggressive one, however, not as favoured as the previous. Odd Paladin does have the ability to just run out of control and burst through a Shadowwalk Shaman, but with the amount of removal and healing that is available in the Shadowwalk Shaman, they can just really put to halt any pressure from the Odd Paladin. And you can see Lightning Storm already there, Volcano as well, Sauronite Chainkang, Acolyte of Pain. I mean, that's all the cards you want, really. That's card draw, that's removal, that is stall mechanics, and you've got that Shadowwalk. But realistically, you can win this game without even the Shadowwalk OTK kind of scenario. You can win this game by just removing, getting to a point where you can build a board with Shadowwalk, where you will be able to beat your opponent down just with the pure bodies that are available. Nothing from Surrender's side to stop Acolyte from getting its value. So Roger is guaranteed to get a card draw, and another Lightning Storm being found makes this turn an extremely simple one if it wasn't already. But with Corridor Creeper in hand for Surrender, at least means he can refuel very successfully. I like this as well, using the Veteran just to make sure that no more value can be found from the Acolyte of Pain. And this is what the Paladin does so well. And this is why it's such a scary deck. As nothing can be played now for Roger. Just has to simply hero power if he wants the hero power. And I imagine you do look for hero power just because of a taunt. And a spell damage totem is something to think about for Surrender as well, because there is potential for another Lightning Storm, and there are minions that could be affected by that a little bit later on, like leveled up Silverhand Recruits, for example. But by a totem being on the board, it does mean that it reduces the chances of Volcano being able to kill everything at a latter point in the game. Although with this particular scenario, it doesn't make a difference at all. So Surrender just having to think, do I play this Blessing of Might? Ideally, you want to play Blessing of Might when you think you can get value across 2 turns with it. And Surrender is going to do that just now. Pressurizing Roger down to just 13 HP. But we can see that Volcano probably going to come out, and Roger not even taking a second to think about it either. And we were talking about refueling, but there isn't much in the hand of Surrender. As I say, that Stonehill Defender is a welcome inclusion to the hand, and Tarim also there. Tarim, a ridiculous card to find from Stonehill Defender, as we all know. This deck is not meant to allow even cards. It's cheating the game. Tarim is just broken when it comes to this deck. And you have the possibility of having Tarim's hand level up. It becomes so scary to face off against an Odd Paladin. And now with Vine Cleaver as well, this means that every turn, from now on, we can potentially see 4 Silverhand Recruits come onto the board. And that is not something that you want to be facing up against, especially when you know that there is the chance of buffed up minions. Lightning Storm number 2 will be used. But this turn, for Surrender, can be quite a juicy one. Unless, as we see, weapon removal can be around. And to make things worse, Glacial Shard as well, to stop a second Vine Cleaver. And that's really going to stop Surrender in his tracks here. It was looking so good. If there wasn't the removal available for Roger, Surrender was in such a good spot, but instead, I don't even know if a second Tarim is going to be able to help Surrender now. But he's going to take it anyway. I mean, Surrender has seen a lot of removal, so he's not going to be too disheartened. He's saying, alright, well, I'm still managing to get somewhat of a board after I've seen a Volcano and 2 Lightning Storms. Whereas Roger can make some trades now. It does mean he's leaving up 1 Silverhand Recruit. And it's such a shame. If Surrender had been able to keep that Vine Cleaver, he could have had a horrible, horrible Tarim turn. Horrible for the opponent, good for him. But instead, he's going to equip a second one and hope to get that turn a little bit later than he would have hoped. Because look at the life total of Roger. He hasn't found those healing rains as of yet. So he's going to dig through his deck with Farsight. Mana Tide will allow to dig even further, and Mind Control tech's available. Doesn't pick up the Corridor Creeper, though. And both Mana Tide and Acolyte just going to allow Roger to get closer to those tools that will allow him to just get out of reach from Surrender. Now, level up there, as well as Sunkeeper Tarim as well. How is Surrender going to approach this one? He can hit the Corridor Creeper into the Saronite Chain Gang, then take out probably the Mana Tide Totem. Or maybe maybe the 1-1. The issue is here, you're probably using level up because Tarim is going to buff up your opponent's board somewhat. But you also don't want to be giving too much card draw to your opponent as well. And with Leroy Jenkins being available in hand, Surrender's certainly going to be thinking, what can I do across these next couple of turns to try and prioritize face damage to be able to put myself in a spot where I can actually win this game and not allow my opponent to draw into lethal possibilities. And he is going for this aggressive stance of using level up to try and defend his board, going face and saying, well, I have 10 damage out of hand next turn. Technically more with Fungalmancer. Make that 12 if the room allows it. But I wonder whether we're going to see a Shudderwalk here. Yes, we are going to see a Shudderwalk. So Mind Control tech's there. Glacial Shards have been used. Of course, Ooze is there, so that gets rid of the weapon. And yeah, okay, he's not going to get another Shudderwalk, but this is what I said, you don't need to. Look at the size now of Roger's board. Okay, Sunkeeper Tarim can reduce that size of the board. But you are still struggling as the Paladin. So you can trade in the 3-3 to the 3-3, then kill off probably just one of the Silverhand recruits. And then maybe Hero Power plus Sunkeeper Tarim. That's as best as you can do. But now with Shudderwalks left on board, if Roger does find a Zola or a Grumble, then it means now he can trade most of his board, Grumble back these Shudderwalks, and the scariness begins. And this game looks like it's going to be over, and it looks like it's going to be going in favor of the Shudderwalk Shaman as well. Because there's going to be so much freeze available. Mind Control tech is going to come out twice. I don't see a way that Surrender comes back into this one. And this has been a really well played game from Roger. He has been given a little bit more time. We've got to look at that Gluttonous Ooze and how important the Gluttonous Ooze was, removing that first Vine Cleaver. If that first Vine Cleaver wasn't removed, then there was potential for Surrender just to be able to beat down Roger to a pulp. So a favoured match for the Odd Paladin, not going in the favour of Surrender, but the cards that were drawn from Roger were just too strong. That Gluttonous Ooze was really important. Surrender not conceding yet. He's saying, well, I'm looking at your life total. It's 19. I do have a Leroy Jenkins available. I do still have a Tarim. And sometimes you just let the animation play out and you work out, well, what is the board left? What is the state of the board? Is there a way that I can still push through this damage? Of course, it's not a case where the life drinkers are going to be pushing for lethal. There isn't the OTK. But next turn, Roger can play one of those life drinkers before he starts playing the Shudderwalk. And start to push that damage. And probably start to make Surrender thinking about surrendering. Oh, is he thinking about Hagatha here? So Hagatha, I mean, Hagatha pretty much just puts this game to bed. But at the same time, so does Life Drink and Shadow Walk. It doesn't really matter which way, because you're going to be playing at least 3 Shadow Walks. That's going to be 6 different freezes available from Glacial Shards, and you've got Mind Control techs as well. But I guess this is the safer option. And Surrender will just concede. He was just having a little look, saying, well, Righteous Protector, Flame Elemental, I do still have my hero power, but it's not enough, and there was never a chance for that Stormwind champion to be played either. So a victory found for the Shadowwalk Shaman, and Roger will be very happy with that one in an unfavored matchup. Having to go up against Token Druid and then Odd Paladin. He certainly would have been a little bit concerned. Although he would have fancied his chances maybe against a Q-Block. Certainly winnable in some scenarios, but we know that Q-Block can just beat anything if it draws well and gets those Mountain Giants and gets Skull of Minari, for example. So all tied up here with the players representing Taipei and the Republic of Korea, retrospectively. And Roger now has to move over to either his Druid or his Hunter. And it is going to be his Hunter. It's a Recruit Hunter going up against Surrender's Q-Block now. A matchup that I don't think many people would have been expecting to see potentially a month or so ago when I don't think we really thought that Recruit Hunter could ever be a thing. It was kind of considered a bit of a meme. But as some of these recruit functions have always done in Hearthstone, they perform very well. We look back at Barnes Yasharaj Hunter, for example. Barnes Big Priest. I know that wasn't really the recruit mechanic, but it was the path that started the possibilities for recruit mechanics. Statistically, I'd say that this is favoured for the Q-Block, but not a very one-sided affair. It is very back and forth. I think if you were to do a show match with 2 professional players with this matchup, I think you'd probably be looking at closer to 50-50, really. You'd have to play enough games for it to warrant actual statistics rather than just like 4 or 5. But generally the Q-Block works well in this matchup because you do have the kind of tools to defend yourself with those Void Lords that can come onto the board. And really it is Gul'dan that makes the difference, because whilst the Recruit Hunter does have an insane amount of value, it is able to get those big beasts on the board nice and early, it doesn't have ability to put them back on the board once they've died, which is what we can see from the Q-Block. But there is a lot of damage and a lot of aggression coming out from Roger already. And with King Crush coming available at 9, it is something that Surrender has to be concerned about. Wow, this would be quite the statement. Surely not. Okay, yeah, Faceless Manipulator would be very weird. With 8 damage potentially available next turn. We'll make that 6 once you've killed off a 2-3. But it's more of a... I mean... It makes me grimace a little bit, but I guess it's more of a winning play. If you really don't think your opponent has that damage, I mean, yeah, if you think about the deck that is available for Roger, the damage isn't really going to be there. There isn't kill commands, etc. But you are risking it for a chocolate biscuit. Roger continuing to apply the pressure, but now 2 Mountain Giants available. Spellstones are there, Defile is there. It looks like Surrender's just going to try and put up a little bit of a wall with Stonehill Defender. Stonehill Defender plus Spellstone looks extremely likely here, and then he can start pushing some damage of his own, actually. And Surrender's played this well, because he knows that it's not going to be until turn 8 that he really sees... Well, turn 7, sorry, that he really sees a potential threat. We can see it's not going to be till turn 8, but there is a chance of Oozling plus Play Dead on turn 7. Well, there's one of those cards, but that isn't two. Surrender now just down to 4, but does have the ability to get some health back, especially now with Dark Pact being drawn as well. So I think maybe you're starting this turn... Start this turn with the Vulgar. I mean, this is good because, A, yes, it's buffing up your Spellstone, but it's also putting another minion in the way. Just in case there is some craziness and lots of charge effects start to happen. But look at the amount of damage Surrender's now done across 2 turns, thanks to that big play of facelessing the Mountain Giant. And it now puts Roger in a position that he can't play a Charged Devilsaur. Instead, he has to go on the defensive in Saronite Chain Gang, and we see a Hellfire that's available, which is just going to finish off the game for Surrender. And that is why the Q-Block is so powerful, because it has these tools. The Mountain Giants are just too much for the Recruit Hunter to deal with. They don't have that direct removal, and there was no cheating of any sort from Roger by being able to get minions out early. He wasn't able to find the minions that recruit minions from his deck, but he drew the minions that would have been recruited anyway in most cases. So Surrender will take a 2-1 lead. A really well played game from him. Realizing and really thinking about what potential damage could come out from his opponent, recognizing that he would stay alive, and he did have the ability in his hand to refuel. And just calling his opponent's bluff, saying, I don't think you have the ability to stop me doing this. And that is why Surrender is one of the best players, not just in this region, but in the world. And that leaves him with an odd Paladin. And you've got to say, with an odd Paladin going into any kind of remaining games that is more than one, you must feel slightly favoured. Could be going up against the Recruit Hunter, which Odd Paladin does very well against. The Recruit Hunter is just too slow. Or he's going up against the Taunt Druid from Roger, which we've not seen yet in this series, which the Odd Paladin also can do very well against. I'll have to wait to see which matchup it's going to be before I start rolling out my statistics. But meanwhile, I can kind of get those statistics up and have a look at these matchups and see what the interweb says, see what my Book of Dreams says. Because I do analyse a lot of my own ladder play, and whilst I recognise that I am not a top tier player who plays consistently with the same deck or the same decks, I do try and spread out my statistics as best as possible to try and give you a good idea of what beats what and what you need to beat other things. And I think everyone's played a lot of Odd Paladin anyway, let's be honest. If you haven't, you're lying to yourself, or why haven't you? If you're looking for a way to get high up in the Legend ranks, or at least get to Legend for the first time, it's probably going to be an Odd Paladin. But it is going to be the Taunt Druid for Roger then. Now, I personally have had a lot of success with Taunt Druid against Odd Paladin, and I feel like that's just because I draw well. And I'm not playing Surrender every game. Hopefully I never play Surrender. Statistically, I think Odd Paladin has around a 55 to 57% win rate against Taunt Druid in online matches. This is at Legend ranks anyway. So the ball is in Surrender's court, and his early game, he's found his 1-drop, that's important. Turn 2 doesn't usually matter because you have the ability just to throw 2 1/1s on the board thanks to the hero power. But Stonehill Defender allows for a little bit of a curve. But Surrender is going to be looking at that level up and saying, how can I get the most minions on the board as possible so that this level up is effective? And I just pray that there's no swipe. Because you got to remember, from the Taunt Druid, even though the name is Taunt Druid, there is no Spreading Plague. And the reason why is because, of course, Witching Hour brings back a beast, and the Spreading Plague are beasts. And you don't want to be bringing those back. You want to be bringing back that big bad boy Hadronox. But Swipe picked up off the top is huge for Roger. Absolutely massive. Next turn, Surrender was going to be able to coin out level up. It's huge, but it's not the end of the world. Corridor Creeper is there for Surrender. That's been made cheaper. Lost in the Jungle now being picked up as well, so he is going to be able to generate even more Silverhand recruits and get that chance for that big level up turn. But if we do get to turn 9, that's when things are going to get dicey for Surrender. Master Oakhart is going to be able to put a big dent in the ability for the Paladin to win the game. Oaken Summons is going to also be able to delay things to make it even possible to get to a turn 9. Roger is opting, quite rightly, to go for Nourish and make sure he gets closer to a turn 9 possibility. And now the Surrender can go with Stonehill Defender plus Hero Power. Tarim's there as well. If level up wasn't enough, having a backup of Tarim if there is any form of clear is really important. But next turn, Lost in the Jungle plus level up is available. We've already seen one swipe, so Surrender should be feeling relatively comfortable, especially as he saw that swipe came off the top. So we'll have a good idea that it's not available. But Primordial Drake also is going to put a big old wall now in and clear out those 1/1s. But Surrender can keep tossing things onto the board because now with the freedom of having Tarim as a backup as well, it means that even if there are big taunts on the board available from Roger, he's going to be able to shrink those big taunts down to just measly little 3/3s. And with Oakhart not being the decision, that actually plays a little bit better into the hands of Roger, but into the hands of Surrender. But what Roger's trying to do is he's trying to set up to be able to get more taunt minions once Hadronox does arrive. And Surrender not even going to pop this Tarim here. He's just going to continue pressurizing with Vine Cleaver. We saw a few games ago how close he was to winning with this deck because of Vine Cleaver, but the Oozling from the Shudderwock Shaman stopped him in his tracks. And the thing is, Surrender's going to be able to push so much damage. Surrender must be expecting Taunt minions to arrive very shortly, whether that be just a Sleepy Dragon on its own. But no, it's going to be Oakhart, and that was a very quick Oakhart as well. With Swipe being available, I wonder if there should have been any sort of consideration for a Swipe there first. Clearly, Roger had it in his mind that he was definitely playing that card. But now it means this 4/12 suddenly just becomes a 3/3. There's one Divine Shield on board. There's also a weapon equipped as well. And with the potential of level up next turn, Surrender maybe edging to close out this series. And with no Hadronox available, Witching Hours are doing nothing. There's also no Naturalize in the deck, so even if Hadronox is drawn, you can't even kill it off. There was, of course, potential for Oakhart to draw Hadronox out of the deck, which is probably what Roger was hoping for. But unfortunately, he didn't get it, and Wild Growth isn't going to help here. You do Wild Growth, see maybe if you can just find a Primordial Drake. You can't play Sleepy Dragon, that's going to be too expensive. Oaken Summons isn't going to help you, really. It might be able to stall. So Branching Paths just for armor, it looks like, to try and stay alive for Roger. Oh, he's drawing first. He's saying that this he thinks the draws are more important. Cube's going to pop out 2 Ironwood Golems. But, and it's a big but, you've got level up available. You've now got Purifier's Maul as well. That's absolutely massive for Surrender. And if he wasn't close enough already, he is edging even closer now. with the ability to play Lost in the Jungle, Hero Power, level up, and then next turn he has a Purifier's Maul available as well. If Hadronox is drawn, there's still a chance that maybe Roger can get back into this, but it's not drawn. So his Witching Hour's doing nothing. Oaken Summon's not going to even get a Golem, so I think you have to Primordial Drake at this point. Combine that with a Spellstone to clear something off. Are you even forced to natural? I don't think you can afford to use a Naturalize because your only hope now is drawing Hadronox and being able to Naturalize it. If you throw away that Naturalize, then you have no win condition whatsoever. Purifier's Maul doesn't allow for lethal, but it does get it blooming close and keeps this whole board alive. You follow that up next turn with the potential of a Vine Cleaver out of hand for an extra 4 damage. That Surrender is just going to be trading this off, praying, just praying that Hadronox isn't drawn. He should have a pretty good idea of what's in the hand of Roger now. I would assume he will know that at least one of those cards on the left is Witching Hour because it's been there, sat there, and I think Roger's been tapping it a few times, probably out of frustration. With only 10 cards left and Hadronox not being found, you are going to be a little bit annoyed, especially when Oakheart has been played. So the final push now from Surrender and the last ditch attempt from Roger. Can he draw that Hadronox? It is his last chance. Even if he does get it, I mean, there's still so much ammo for Surrender in this arsenal of his that he's just created. That the odd Paladin always does. Is it Hadronox? It's not Hadronox. Nourish is not going to be able to do anything. Oaken Summons isn't going to save Roger. He's probably going to draw through anyway just to see if he can find that Hadronox and say, alright, there it was. But the fact that Oakheart didn't even get Dragon Hatch around, or did it? Maybe it did. Maybe there was 2 Dragon Hatches. Regardless, Surrender is going to be the winner. He's going to win 3-1 here in a really well-played series. I love the lineup that he's brought to this tournament. It worked very well against Rogers. He had a very favourable list against Roger in general, but he also played it very successfully. A huge congratulations to Surrender, who is going to take this series 3-1.